with this. We're gonna break it at noon for lunch. That's when I will have to leave. We will not be taking any other formal breaks, but if you certainly need to step away, please feel free to do so. I think that goes without saying. This meeting is being recorded and streamed live on YouTube. So while the meeting's in progress, just be careful about shuffling papers. I gotta say this as I shuffle my papers. Simply for the simple reason that it interferes with the audio that's being taped. So, and also remember, your side conversations, and I am one of the worst, as Janie will tell you, but it could be recorded and it could come across something that you maybe didn't want everyone else to hear. Please fill out your match forms. They're printed, they're placed at your seats, and this is required by our Federal Court Improvement Program grant, which of course is very, very important for us financially. Allowable travel expenses, including parking fees, can be reimbursed, and there are printed reimbursement forms available, or you can access those on the Children's Commission website. Collaborative council members have submitted requests to provide verbal updates at the meeting, and we just want to make it clear to everyone that if you did not make that formal request, that certainly doesn't mean that you will not have an opportunity to talk. So if you do want to do that, please fill out a speaker card. We encourage you to do that if there's something that you want to express. And thank you so much for making this meeting as seamless as possible. We all appreciate it. So now I invite you to look at tab 1. We have some membership changes and these were, they're in the meeting notebook that was distributed in advance of the meeting. It includes the commission, committee, and collaborative council members, as well as our wonderful staff. And I must, as always, thank the Children's Commission staff. Our staff is wonderful and works so hard, and we all, the entire court, appreciates that very, very much. So thank you. Jordan Watson from Protects rolled off the Systems Improvement Committee. And we certainly thank Ms. Watson for her participation and hard work and valuable expertise. I am very pleased to announce that Chantel Bellington, one of our commissioners, will join that System Improvements Committee, and we certainly appreciate your serving in this capacity. Bruce Kendrick has taken on an expanded role in the Watermark, and so he can no longer serve on Collaborative Council. We certainly thank him for many years as a member on the council, and we seek to identify another faith-based leader to join as soon as we possibly can. We have some guests today, and as those presentations are going to come out throughout the day, we will introduce the guests at that time so that we don't lose track of who's who as we go. So let's look at our minutes. They were distributed behind tab 2 on page 13 in the PDF and the meeting notebook. I hope that you all had an opportunity to review the minutes. And so, does anybody have any corrections? Looking around, seeing none, is there a motion to adopt the minutes from the November 2023 meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you so much. Those minutes are adopted. So now we're going to have our report from the department. I am very excited to hear about an initiative called Texas Child Centered Care, or T3C. And so I invited this time Ms. Benuelos and Ms. Tesada to provide the updates that we so eagerly await. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us here. So I know that most of y'all got the one-pager for children without placement, and I know that's where you all want to start, but we're actually going to start with something else. I know that November, of course, is our big adoption month, and the last time I presented on some of our adoption efforts that we have, and so I know that you all are very much a part of the process. And so every August at the end of our fiscal year, we go back and we look look at those children that their goal is adoption, and also they have actually been in their intended to be permanent placements. So they're actually in their intended placement for adoption, but they might have some things that we're still trying to work through to get them to the adoption process. So we identified 2,418 children who are currently in their intended to be permanent placement. As a result, we have an effort that we call PUSH, which means Put Me in a Safe Placement or Home. These are staff who specialize in just getting this child to the adoption stage, working with a relative, working with the CPAs, working with the courts and the attorneys to try to get their adoptions consummated. So our goal is to be able to get all 2,418 children adopted. So for the first quarter of this fiscal year, we were able to consummate a total of 919, which is really, really good. Super excited about that. So we're at about 38% of our goal. So we will.
Can I ask you,
Yes.
so these are children whose parents' rights have been terminated, and so they're available for adoption from a legal perspective.
Absolutely.
What is keeping that from happening?
Sometimes it can be, I see a little bit more on the kinship placements because they have to go through the licensure process in order to go through the adoption. And so that takes a little bit longer because, as you might imagine, we really have to walk alongside our kinship caregivers. It is a pretty long process for them. And so having somebody to help them fill out the papers and having somebody to help them, go through the trainings and do those kinds of things can be time consuming for them. So we really, the PUSH specialist helps with that. Sometimes it's a matter of, we need documents, right? We're still missing a birth certificate, from out of state, which those take a while to get. So it can be a variation of different things. So having somebody to just concentrate on the administrative piece of it really helps us to move these adoptions forward. So definitely these are children that, don't really need to be a part of our system anymore. But of course we want to make sure they get adopted. And
What percentage is kinship care?
I don't have the percentage with me.
So what about the non-kinship care children?
The non-kinship care can sometimes be, sometimes maybe they just signed up to foster and, now they want to adopt, so they have to amend the home study, maybe the age is different. So it can be different logistical pieces that are missing there. And then some, we are also working with them in terms of, are you still moving forward with adoptions? And sometimes that can be, as much as they want to, they're saying, yes, we're committed, we are moving forward. Things happen and sometimes they're like, I don't know at this point. And so really working with them intensively to figure out, okay, are we moving forward? If not, we got to find another option for a child that is eligible for adoption. But primarily it's administrative things that we have to do to get them moving forward with the adoption. Thank you. Yes.
Are you still seeing delays, at least when I was on the court? If someone was, termination occurred at 9 months, the baby's 9 months, many of the relatives, they get no benefits until the child turns 2 years old. And so sometimes simply trying to seek benefits to continue to support the placement might result in a 13-month delay when the child is legally ready for adoption. But because of our arbitrary deadline of 2 years versus 1 versus 6 months of getting government benefits, it results in delay. You're seeing that still?
I am sure that might be one of the barriers, but I have not heard lately that is the main barrier to getting the children adopted. But it might be one of the barriers that you've identified.
And of course, that's a systemic problem that I suppose generates from the federal government. It might be an area of advocacy because why is 2 years different than 12 months? I mean, what's the magic marker of 2 years?
Yeah, but thank you for bringing that up. I will definitely go back and look at that to see is that still a big impact for us or not? So I appreciate that feedback.
Yes. I have a couple of questions. One, I'd love to see this data by race ethnicity, and I'd like to know the percentage of children who are in care, and what the percentage of children are that are, in kinship care and are being adopted. I'd also, I know in the past the agency has done a number of things to help expedite processes, particularly for kinship caregivers. So I'd like to know what the agency is doing to expedite the process. If you have a kinship caregiver, and I say this because this program is near and dear to my heart. Actually, when I came to Texas from Louisiana, that program had just been, that bill had just been passed, and I got to organize it and put it together. And so it's a personal thing for me because of the work I've done over 30 years in child welfare. Saying all that, I want to know what the agency is doing to help expedite processes, because if you have a kinship caregiver and they're already in the system, it makes sense to me that we would be looking at, if we know that a child, that there may be termination in the future, it seems that we would be already working towards that process and working with that caregiver. And then kind of piggybacking on what Judge Burns said, well, two things. One is, are we working with HHSC in terms of expediting benefits for those families? Because, oftentimes we have all these agencies that are doing things, but we're not always effectively communicating. So I can see that maybe we can put a process in place. We've done waivers when kinship caregivers wanted to adopt, or families of color wanted to adopt, and there were laws in place that said you had to have a high school diploma. We put things in place, worked with the federal government to address that. So it just seems to me that if we have a family member that is already caring for a child, we should be flipping stones and doing tumble sets to ensure that those children have an opportunity to stay with their family permanently. I know I said a whole lot.
Oh, no, it's okay. No, I agree with the urgency that we have to have when we're working with kinship providers. And so that has been one of our big priorities, is to really figure out how can we work with kinship more efficiently, more urgently, what type of supports can we provide them. And we actually worked, I don't want to call it a task force, but it was a group of different providers that came together, and we put out, Casey actually put out sort of the findings of, different kinship efforts that we would like to see or are already seeing. Simple things, even like daycare, right, which is huge to kinship providers. And to address, working with them early on. So absolutely, we try to get our staff, we have dedicated kinship staff that are just for the kinship caregivers. They're in the home for the caregivers, not for the child. And their sole work is to work hand in hand with that caregiver to get them to either get licensed, right? Because there's a lot monetarily, there's some benefits there when you go to PCA, which is a permanency care assistance. And then also we know that if they get the PCA early on, then when it comes time where the child is eligible for adoption, they're already licensed, and that process goes a lot faster and quicker. So we recognize that, and we actually have a group in the Valley that does, they call them fast ship workers. So they do both together. So they're moving them through the licensure process, and at the same time, they're the kinship worker. So they're able to work on getting them licensed up front and then, moving them into the adoption process.
So when you say that you're hearing from the providers, are you talking about the kinship providers?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, so we had feedback from, we have a group across the state that we meet with, and they are kinship, with lived experience, and so they give us feedback on processes, what they're hearing from the other kinship caregivers, what can we change in our policy. Right now, we're looking at our initial placements with kinship and looking at the policy that we currently have that tells us, you know, what we have to do before we can consider a kinship caregiver, and really looking at making that a shorter process in hopes that we can place from the onset and have that be the last placement for the child. So when it comes to kinship, we are just very, very focused on, again, just working urgently, supporting them and getting those services to them that will hopefully help them, even when times get rough, that we're able to walk with them through that so that we can keep the child in the home.
Last comment, one of the things that we did early on was we worked with Head Start. We worked with the Housing Authority, and what Head Start did was they put those children at the top of the list because they were involved with the state to address the child care issues. So that might be something. Head Start has early Head Start, and it has the regular Head Start program. So again, every stone unturned, because you have families that are already willing to take on that responsibility, and it's a huge one.
Absolutely, daycare is one of the most critical components of this being successful for kinship caregivers, and so we are able to provide them with a daycare. There is a couple of sort of stipulations, you know, one parent has to be working full time, but this summer we did, I think it was in the summer, we did make an adjustment to that process and did a waiver for some of those requirements to make it a lot easier for them to access that daycare. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome. And on the data that you asked about, we do have, on our main website, we do have our data book, and it's about to be refreshed, I believe. But you can find probably the majority of the statistics that you're wanting to see. And you can look at the whole state or county by county. So I would encourage you to visit our main website, and you should be able to access that. Or if you wanna just provide me your email, I can send you the link to that.
Thank you.
I would like to know how many, I think a moment ago when you were referring to the number of people in kinship care and you didn't know, but I think we were talking about a subset of the whole, right? And so, do you have the percentages of how many children who are in the process of gaining permanency because termination has already occurred? How many of those children of the whole are put in kinship care?
So we have the percentage of our children that are currently placed in a kinship home, which is about 41%, I think, when I last looked at it. So those are children already in kinship.
And that means, and that's everyone's, those whose parental rights have been terminated and those that have not?
No, this is both.
That's what I mean, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
It would include those where we terminated and those where we haven't, and it also includes those that have already been licensed and those that have not been licensed.
And so does that percentage tend to remain constant after termination? Because they're already in a kinship care?
I don't have that percentage.
We definitely have that data. Off the top of my head, I don't think it's significantly different, but we can definitely.
It seems like it wouldn't be, but
No.
y'all have the numbers.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the next thing I would like to talk about is the one pager that you have in front of you, and this is our children without placement data. And I know earlier we kind of talked about, I know that a lot of people are very interested in this data and sort of what is the department doing to address these youth or children. And so we are putting together a monthly, we update as frequently as we can because we want to make sure that everyone is aware of all the efforts that we're doing. This is a priority for us. And so being able to share this with everyone, I think hopefully you'll find it very helpful, and it'll give you a better picture into the work that goes into not just finding a placement, but finding the right placement. So if you look at your top left corner, what you'll see is that we are definitely decreasing the number of kids without placement, and that really is, it's everyone who is impacting this. It's not just us. It's providers who have been willing to work with our children who have some pretty intense needs. And typically, these are youth. It's the judges who sometimes have to get on the phone with a child who has a placement but is not willing to go. The judges have been instrumental in that process. They'll take our calls whenever we need them, and that is very, very helpful. And or sometimes they set hearings to, bring the youth to court and order them to go to their placement. So that has been very helpful. CASA is involved in this process as well. They have very good relationship with our youth, and they advocate for placements. We also have the ad litems. It is, there's my placement team. There's the mental health piece. It's a lot of different organizations, different pieces to making this number continuing to decrease. So we are truly very thankful for the support that you all lend us. So as you can see, we continue to go down on any given day. When I look at the daily census, it can fluctuate between 56 to 60. Sometimes it'll go down as low as 45. It just depends how many kids we have coming in and how many we find placements for or get placements. Yes.
I have a question on the numbers that you're using, the data. Are you accounting runaways in these numbers?
So, yes. So if they run away from Child Watch, then they're not in the daily census, but they would be captured. If they've been in CWAP, they would be captured as part of the unique. So see how there's two, there's total unique children and the average.
Okay, so under the blue line, then that
Yes.
will have the runaway numbers in it.
That's correct.
Thank you.
And what about at the time of removal? So what do you know, what is the percentage of those kids that are at that immediate, emergency period of time?
So I will say that at the majority of the time, at the time of removal, we sometimes do see children without placement. I think probably the most common ones are going to be those where we are removing because of a RAP or refusal to accept parental responsibility. If you look at the right-hand side of the chart, 49% of our kids who experience a CWAP event, the removal reason is a RAPer, which refusal to accept. So that kind of, that's a population that we are really working very, very hard individually with psychiatric hospitals where we sometimes see them.
That's what my next question was. Where are what's being
Absolutely.
done so that those children that have these serious behavioral whatever issues can be
Yes.
placed quickly?
Absolutely. So we work very closely with the psychiatric hospitals. We are looking also at the front end of when children are coming in. What do they look like? Who can we work with? We have Trina Eaton now at our agency to help us with some of that mental health piece and that connection with the state hospitals as well. Some kids will come from juvenile. And so we are working closely with juvenile as well, having meetings with them to discuss, the children that we see and really trying to partner with them to see what solutions we can all come up with. So that is somewhere else where we see them come in.
I had a question about the juvenile justice involvement. Does that include kids who have a juvenile episode while in CWAP, or does it have to predate the CWAP incident? How's that data measured?
It would show up, if they have a juvenile involvement at any point in time, then at that point in time, that would show up as a behavior characteristic from then on.
So are any of the children who do not have placements at that front end, are any of those children who do not have these behavioral issues either because the parent decides they can't do anything anymore, or because of some other reason that has come about? Are there any children that don't fit those two categories that are still having problems?
There are very rare circumstances where we cannot find an immediate placement. And that, that might be sort of more typically what we had experienced historically. We have implemented a number of processes, like for just by way of example, we implemented a policy maybe in September or October that the associate commissioner, so Erica, would have to approve even one night without placement for any child age 10 and under. And we have seen that almost completely. We are not having any of that whatsoever.
And what percentage was it and what has it gone down?
It was already low, and now, I mean, if you look on this particular one, you'll see, 10 to 13 is 10%, so that means there's no bar below age 10. So for the month of December, we did not have any child below age 10 spend one night.
Yes, and if we happen to have one, I'm on the placement team the next day, like, okay, what are we gonna find, where are we at? So, we monitor that very, very
So there's
closely.
ongoing systems in place to make sure that.
Absolutely. It's a big effort of various things to happen, yes.
And Justice Norman, I'd like to piggyback off of that, because what I'm seeing in the courts, the children that are relatively stable, there's not a placement problem typically. What we're seeing mostly is these children with these criteria here within the physical aggression and below, that it's just, there's a specialized, unique type of placement for them, and oftentimes, depending on whatever criteria is listed out in their packet, they may not fit that criteria, or they may have been at that placement but before, but have been discharged because of one of these matters that took place, and so that placement has already said, well, we may not be accepting that child back because of that issue. So that's a lot of what I'm seeing on the court level.
Right.
And to follow up on, just real quick, what, under the category of unique children again, who all fall into that category of unique children?
That's if a child has been in CWAP at least, I don't know if it's 1 or 2 nights.
Any second
Yeah,
night
any second
for the
night
entire
for the
month.
month.
Okay, and the runaways, they would be caught there too?
Yes, if they
They
have
ran through
spent,
CWAP.
yes, if they've been in CWAP.
Okay, now I understand.
Yes.
Thank you.
And so just to talk a little bit about what you were saying, Judge, about the needs of the children and so, or the youth, because we do know, if you look at this, the larger number of our population is older youth, 16 to 17. We have, and you're right, some providers have capacity, but because some of the behaviors that they've already seen, they're not, they're worried, and so it is a little bit harder to find a placement. I will say that we have a lot of efforts going on to grow the right capacity, and what I mean by that is capacity that can work intensively, provide those mental health treatment services. So we have like our intensive stabilization program that we continue to work on expanding. We have qualified residential treatment centers, which I was just gonna give you all a little bit of update on that since I know we talked about it here. We have, the clinical coordinators closely following them and also trying to support them as they move on to their next placement, because we know that that's such a crucial moment when they're moving. If we can find a placement, that is the time that we really have to support not just the youth, but also the provider who said, I'm willing to work with them. And so if you look at the front page, this little circle down here, we know that if kids can successfully stay in their placement at the 31-day mark, they don't recidivate back into CWAP. And that as time progresses, it really, the more they can stabilize in their placement for a longer period of time, that hopefully helps them not to come back into placement. So we know that move is very, very important and that they need all the support that they can get. So our clinical coordinators continue to follow them intensely to stabilize them in their next placement. And then we also have, for our capacity, we have really worked on increasing the number of TFFC beds, which are our treatment foster care treatment beds. And those are crucial for us because that is almost like working one-on-one with our youth and then transitioning them and working with the caregiver to transitioning them down to grandma's house or back to, or to an RTC or to another foster home who can then meet their needs. And we've had a lot of efforts, a lot of help. I'm looking at Katie, a lot of help from the Alliance to really increase this capacity with providers. This is a capacity that's very much needed. And it also gives them a home-like setting to address these really, these needs that they have. So just really quickly, because I know that we have to have enough time for y'all want to hear about Casey. On the qualified, and so in the back of this sheet, I won't go through all of them because we don't have a lot of time, but this really speaks to all of our ongoing efforts. I was just telling the judge, I'm like, the number of youth that we have, while it seems, we want to be to zero, even with just 57 or 60, it takes probably 80%, 90% of our time almost daily. Our focus is on how can we make this better for our kids, and so this really speaks to all the different efforts that are going on in our agency. And I'm just going to give you a quick update on QRTPs, which are Qualified Residential Treatment Program, and then I will pass it on to Audrey to give you an additional sort of update on some things that are more concentrated on kids without
Hey,
placement.
Erica, before you move off of that, just two quick questions that might have been addressed. I apologize for lateness. I am turned around downtown now. I don't know what's going on. So I apologize for that. And if you covered this, just say you covered it and I'll step back. But when you were talking about the juvenile justice piece, how many kids were on the JJ status prior to entering CWAP? Do you have that number?
I don't have that number with me.
Okay.
Do you know?
I think the chart shows the number that have JJ involvement previously, and
That's
we
prior to
do,
coming in.
but it's prior to coming in,
Right,
yes.
okay.
They have to have that JJ involvement in order to show up as having a JJ behavior
Okay.
indicator.
Super.
So, that's just one of the
No,
characteristics.
that's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then my second question, and it's my last question for now, would be how many of these, do we know in here how many ended up with JJ involvement after becoming involved with CWAP? Do we have, was that number given? I see heads shaking. No.
I
We
don't
don't
know
know,
that
yeah.
so we're working on some data matching with JJD right now to help us do that more, what I've been calling, a longitudinal analysis that's really focused on tracking that continuum on a child-by-child basis. So I don't think we have that exact number right now, but I do think we are working towards that.
Thank you.
I have a question before we move on. I think I heard you say that for the children to be counted in the CWAP numbers, they have to have spent a second night in CWAP. So what happens, where do those children fall that don't make it to that second night and they run away? Is that captured in this?
I do think just practically speaking, they would be captured in here because they would come, we see them come back over and over again just historically. The reason we measure it that way is what does happen is we have children, initial removals typically, usually who might be removed very, very late. And so we don't count them as CWAP while we're searching for that placement for that first 24-hour period. They show up in that next 24-hour period.
But those that run away.
Well, if they come into CWAP, they would have to come to CWAP. Typically, we don't see them. If they're gonna stay, they're gonna stay beyond the one night, so they will be counted. They typically don't come and go in one day. At least.
And I think probably the best answer is we absolutely have that
We do.
information and data. We just we don't consider those to be children who are in a CWAP status.
Okay.
I think, just anecdotally, we don't see that happen very often because they come back for a night or two periodically and then they would be showing up. But we can certainly drill down on that.
Thank you.
Erica, I just got one other question for clarification from the gallery about bullying. So does that mean they're a victim of bullying or they're being accused of bullying? Can you clarify that data component?
I think that's
So-
the same thing.
Yeah, so for the bullying is they demonstrate bullying behavior.
And I will just add very quickly that those characteristics, change month over month. So the first few are, it's very stable, the
Yes.
characteristics. But bullying, goes in and out with, I don't remember the other one, but it's kind of the lowest, and that's why it's on some months, not on in others.
So you have this great sheet with all the efforts, and then on our qualified residential treatment centers, which are so important to us in terms of delivering those very intensive trauma services. We currently have, we continue to have 3 main locations that are fully functioning. And we are actually in the process of working with 4 providers to open up or to move over to a QRTP model. We have internal staff that work under my division that work hand in hand with those providers that want to move into being a QRTP. They do require to be accredited, which is a process in itself. So our staff are able to help and to walk them through that process. We did get some funding to provide grants to those providers because it is really expensive to become accredited. And so we had already awarded some grants to those that have gone through the process. And now we're on our second round of giving out QRTP accreditation grants. And then we're gonna do a third round of grants to hopefully get more providers to move into this type of model. It's a very intensive model. It's very child family focused, and we have seen some great results from those that have gone through the program. And one of my favorite parts of it is that the QRTP has to provide 6 months of aftercare, which is phenomenal. And we currently have had 9 successful discharge, and so those youth are getting the aftercare services with whatever placement they went to. If they went to kinship or they went to a foster home. So that is probably one of my favorite parts, and also that it's very focused with the child and the caregiver, which is so important. So hopefully we'll be able to increase those next 4 providers, and we currently have 50 children who are placed in a QRTP and are receiving these services. Yes.
I had a question about your QRTP kids. You know, we spend a lot of time here at the commission getting the findings prepared for courts, and a little bit of a concern that judges were going to be trying to fit all their kids in QRTPs. Do you have any feedback for us, you know, initially about how those hearings are going with the findings, or any other judicial insight for us?
Yeah, so, yes, so, in speaking to my director who's over it, and she does have some statistics, and I don't have them with me, but, all of these have gone through the judges, and the judges have been very open to approving, the placements. We really have not had a lot of pushback. And I think part of that is due to the fact that it is such an intensive model and the services that they offer are so unique, that the judges have been willing to try it. And I think for those that have, they like it. And so we continue to have great success with the judges approving these placements.
Thank you.
Ms. Banuelos, could you remind me again where regionally where they are located? I'm trying to remember
Sure,
if you had it in your Bear County or not.
Sure. So we have New Horizons, and that one is on the Dallas area? Yes. Yeah. And then we have Audrey Grace, which is in Abilene, and then we have one that's by St. Francis, and that one's in Lubbock.
Okay, so we have
Currently, we have 3.
three right now.
Yes.
Okay, and there's a
And there's
projection for 4.
Yes.
No,
For
4
well,
more.
there's
projections
there's,
for
yeah,
4.
For 4 more.
Yes.
And those 4, where will those land?
I don't know yet the location, do you know?
I believe that, my recollection is that 2 of them are in the Houston area, and one of them is in Central Texas, and I'm not recalling the 4th one.
You said Cibolo?
Huh?
Did you say
Central
Cibolo? Oh, Central.
Central.
Okay, thank you.
But Judge, I have your email and address, and I'd be happy to send that to you.
Okay, if you would, please, and then,
Absolutely.
because obviously, we have some, there would be a great resource that we have, because that seems to be a perfect fit for a lot of the kids that we're dealing with too.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and that's all I had for QRTPs, and so, oh, I stole yours. And then Audrey's gonna talk to us a little bit more about a different effort.
Good morning. I think I have met many of you, but just in case I haven't met you, my name is Audrey O'Neill. I am new to the department as the Deputy Commissioner over programs. So that is a new position that was funded by the legislature last legislative session. And I joined in this role, I joined the department in May on a loan and then started this role in October. And in that role, I'm overseeing CPS, CPI, statewide intake, and then our adult protective services programs. But as Erica said, addressing our gap in services for children without placement remains the core focus for our organization. And so we're really doing that on 2 different levels. What you see here is really an overview of a very wide range of strategic efforts, but there are just a couple of things that are more sort of like nuts and bolts practical that we are implementing now that I wanted to share with you today. First is that we are in the process of hiring dedicated staff to work with our children who are temporarily without placement. We know that kids do better when they have a consistent adult, obviously, in their lives. And I will tell you, when we posted this first group of positions a few months ago, we were all holding our breath to see whether we would have applicants for these positions, and I am very excited to report that we have filled the first 30 positions, and we are in the process of, we sort of started with 30 because we weren't sure we'd be able to get 30. So now we're in the process of identifying and are posting additional positions. Those positions are going to be used in a variety of ways. First and foremost, as you can imagine, to provide consistency for youth who are currently without placement in their current locations, wherever that might be. So in Central Texas, that might be a leased home, it might be a hotel. In Houston, it's likely going to be a hotel. So that's the very first thing, and it's never as quick as you want it to be, but we are seeing results, and our first employees have actually started providing those staffing services.
So explain to me what you mean by the hotel.
So like, for example, as I'm sure you know, some children are temporarily without placement in a hotel setting. So rather than caseworker shifts, there will be a dedicated staff member who is there. It will not be a different caseworker from day to day. It will be the same caseworker. And these are, I'm calling them caseworkers, but really they have experience as caseworkers. They will not be carrying any caseload whatsoever. This is 100% their dedicated job. We are also in the process of rolling out additional training. We already have about 8 trainings that we require prior to working a shift of children without placement. And I will say, having completed those trainings, it is a lot of training to get through. But it is a very, very challenging job, and we recognize that additional training is really critical. And so we are in the process of rolling out a wide range of additional training. It's everything from an in-person mental health first aid class to a suite of courses offered online through UTSA. I believe that's a behavioral health suite. So there's a range of additional training that we will be requiring for those dedicated staff. And then, so that's kind of the first thing. We have also just hired a couple of weeks ago a dedicated position that is a director level position reporting directly to me. That is her, it's the position title is Director of Special Projects, that this is her special project. Her name is Lauren Lacefield Lewis. She has a lot of experience in the state hospital system. She's worked in the Waco Center for Youth. So she's a lot of experience with acute behavioral and mental health care needs with IDD individuals. So we're very grateful to have her on board, and she is really laying a lot of structural groundwork for us. And a big part of what she is doing in these first few weeks, I've never had an employee that was more excited to start work, and I've never been more grateful for someone to be ready to start work. She was at our office every day for the entire week before she joined our staff. So we're so excited to have her on board. Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you mentioned two things. You said that would be a dedicated staff, but will that staff be working 24 hours a day?
You're talking about the
In the hotel.
initial 30, yeah. So, I mean, obviously, one person is not going to work
Right,
24
that's
hours
right,
a day. But eventually, our hope is to have a dedicated staff on all shifts.
Okay.
That is gonna take some time. So that is a lot of positions.
Okay.
Go
Okay,
ahead.
that was one question. The other question is, you mentioned leasing a home, or but I didn't. I'm trying to understand that process. What is that?
So currently, our current structure is, as I think everyone here knows, we do not keep children and youth in office buildings, period. That is, there is a statute that prohibits us from doing that, and we do not do that, and overnight in any circumstances that I have ever heard of. So where we do, right now, temporarily house youth is in hotels, in leased homes, and there are a couple of other organizations, like for example, maybe a church that we have an agreement with, but the vast majority are in hotels and in leased homes.
And I guess what I'm asking is, in the leased home, is there supervision, or is it just you lease a home and the children just go there?
Oh, no,
I
it has the same caseworker oversight. Right now, on any given shift, we require at a very, very minimum, 2 department staff or department staff and a consistent contracted employee, and security at a bare minimum. And we raise and lower that depending on the needs of the individual youths in that setting.
So how many of those settings are there, say, like in Houston? I mean, are there a lot of different hotels that are being utilized, or one, or how does that work?
It's not just one, it's multiple. We have a list of them. We're happy to share that. I don't want to hazard a guess. It's not more than like 15 in Houston for sure, but I don't want to hazard. I don't know if it's 6 or 10. So we can certainly share that information with you. And in most situations across the state right now, it is hotels, and that's really where the last piece of this current effort comes into play. We know that hotels are not a great way by any far stretch of the imagination to do this, and we know that hotels simply do not provide enough structure for probably any teenagers, but definitely not for teenagers with the trauma history and the behavioral and mental health needs of our youth. And so we are working through a number of efforts to identify some more structured locations. And by more structured location, just to kind of give you a mental picture of what that means, it might mean a place that used to serve as an RTC, a residential treatment center, or something like that. So we're working on looking at a number of different locations right now. Some of those are further along than others. But we really believe that combination of consistent staffing and more structured locations will provide a better situation for youth as a short-term solution. However, our relentless focus remains finding those youth an appropriate placement. And absolutely, these are efforts designed to provide better stability, better structure, help our youth be prepared to accept a placement, while we continue to pursue as our very highest priority, finding them an appropriate placement.
And so when you refer to the 30 employees that you were afraid you wouldn't be able to have, are you talking about those positions are serving these children in the hotels?
Right now, that is how we are in the process of deploying them, yes.
And did you think you wouldn't be able to get people because of pay, or?
I think we have heard a lot of concerns from our caseworkers, and we were not sure that, and we posted this initial round, we required caseworker experience because we knew that we would be able to deploy that more quickly. And we just did not know if we would have caseworkers that would apply to do it, and we did.
Audrey, one, I like that you're looking for more structured locations because those are structured for observation, which hotels are not. So my question is, where are these caseworkers in relation to, are they in the room with the child? Are they in the hallway? How many kids are in a location? So how many people are actually watching?
I'll use my experience yesterday as by way of example. But it's a small number. We know, and this is something we're considering as we figure out these more structured locations. It is not successful if you put too many youth in one location. And I mean, I can see everyone nodding because that's not really rocket science to figure that out. So like, for example, I was at a hotel yesterday and there were 3 youth at that hotel. It tends to be same gender, and that was the case where I was last night. And there were 3 adults and 3 youth. And it's a balance, right? And because you do have to have that constant supervision. But teenagers need their privacy also. So that's really a balance. So I was telling Erica just before we started, I spent a lot of time standing in the doorway because that's just that right balance of you have your autonomy and I know you're safe. And that's all we want to make sure you're safe. We want to make sure you're connected, you're engaged. And I think that is, in my experiences, that's very typical. I think that's typical in Erica's experiences as well.
But sometimes we do run up against the issues of having to do one-to-one. And I mean, just by way of example, I have one right now who's extreme behavioral issues, very low IQ. Psychiatric says they're good to be released, they're not gonna be self-harm, but I know that this child has some medical conditions as well as prior self-harm issues. And I can't trust that her being alone in CWAP in her room is actually a safe option for her. And so I have 24-hour eyes on her
Is
constantly.
necessary, yeah.
And I know that they're one-offs and it's not the general rule, but in those situations you have to do that. And I realize it's a strain on resources for you, but I don't have any other options at that point.
Yeah, and I will say that when kids are coming into where we can't find a placement, the RD, the PA, the PD, these are positions in the regions, they should be screening the children or the youth to make sure that where we're gonna place them is the right environment. Meaning that if I have a child that has child sexual aggression, I have to be aware of where I'm going to place that child, and they might need their own room, right, because of the designation, or they might, be with an older youth, but we need more staff there. That's why Audrey said, like, we have to have a minimum of the 2. However, based on the needs or the characteristics of any child, they might need their own room, they might be able to share, but we need more people to supervise. So that is something that they do evaluate.
I would just say that if there are individual situations that you are aware of where you feel like that additional, we do provide one-to-one supervision when we know it is needed. If you have a situation or another judge that encounters a situation where they feel like that is needed and not happening, they should reach out to the regional director. They can reach out to Erica. They can reach out to me. And it is our expectation that is occurring when it needs to occur.
That's good, because that's very important. We certainly don't want any child to inflict self-harm.
Of course.
How quickly do you foresee deploying because I know in Harris County, our caseworkers are working in court all day, and then they're going to do CWAP in the evenings, and they are exhausted, and they are leaving. And we are losing really great caseworkers because they are exhausted by this.
I think, so we've started deploying. I think a lot of it will depend how quickly we get applicants. We do, I think, have some applicants in Harris County. And we are, because, we know that Harris County, Travis, or Central Texas really, and San Antonio, those are our most challenging areas. So our staff will be prioritized with that in mind for sure. So I am hopeful it will happen all within the next few months, but we are moving as quickly as we possibly can get applicants and can get those individuals trained to do the jobs.
So I hate to interrupt, but we need to get to the T3C part of this, and we're running out of time. But that is so important what you're doing, and of course, there's lots of questions because it is so important, and we really appreciate your efforts and the work, and obviously, you're making improvements and going in the right direction. I think that some, there's just such a need for so much staff, and as you said, we can't overwork these people either, or that's just not going to work. But I know that you all know about these issues and are really paying attention to it, so thank you very much. And so we could hear about T3C.
So it's been a good foundation. My name's Casey Cassetta. I'm also with DFPS, a good foundation to lay for T3C with all of this discussion because you're talking today about the foster care system that we know today. T3C, or Texas Child Center Care, represents where we're headed in the future with foster care. It is a whole new structuring, and I think if I point this somewhere. Okay. So anyway, Texas Child Centered Care represents an entire, I say, rebuild of the foster care structure, the infrastructure behind foster care. We have, for a very long time, I'm going to see if I can, there we go, if I can advance it, because I wanted to start with a little something here. A question of how old is the Texas service level system, which is the infrastructure for foster care. And I thought this would be fun. Because that is what I looked like when it was designed. And as you can see, I do not look like that any longer. It also represents that children holding a Tiger Beat David Lee Roth poster at 8 years old, children are different today. The things that they face just by being in the world today is very different than I had to face at 8 years old. We have a very old, antiquated system, the service level system that has served its time. It is 36 years old. The Tiger Beat picture was in 1984. So the legislature in 1984 underwent a design of the service level system, a design of minimum standards for child care regulation. It took 4 years to get all of that put together, and in 1988, what we know today as the Texas Service Level System became the form of assessment, the service definition for foster care, the way we contract for foster care, and the way we pay for foster care, all derived from a model that is now 36 years old. There have been times, in 1988, if some of you were around, the original service level system was a number-based system, so children were assessed still by Youth for Tomorrow, even back in 1988, and they were either leveled at a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. In 2004, there was an effort that revamped the service level system, and it became what we know today as basic, moderate, specialized, intense. We've had a couple of things, as you can see on the timeline there, where we've added in new services really to meet gaps, but nothing that has overhauled or looked at overhauling the way we assess children or the way that we look at it. We talked a little bit about treatment foster care here earlier. There was some new levels, Intense Plus, temporary emergency placement. All those things have derived out of a need to fill a gap, but never a dismantling and overhauling of an entirely new system. T3C is that new system. As a little bit of background, we've been working on this project for 6 years now. It started in out of the 86 legislative session, where we were directed with HHSC as our rate setters to conduct an evaluation of our rate methodology for foster care in Texas. HHSC contracted with Public Consulting Group. They met with stakeholders. Some folks that I see in the room were part of that, part of PCG's work, and made recommendations to the 87th legislature on things that needed to occur within our foster care system to modernize it. The 87th legislature directed us, as DFPS working with HHSC, to define out clearly defined program models, or what we call service packages. So as we move away from having a leveling system, which they directed us to do, and come up with clearly defined service packages, this spends less emphasis, as the level system does, on behaviors and how behaviors manifest in children, and instead define out the services that we need to purchase to get to the root cause and treatment and recovery of children in the system. So you'll see that the clearly defined service packages, when we get there, really align to child need and making sure children are placed in accordance with the type of treatment, the type of therapy, the type of recovery that they need in the system. It also directed us to use a uniform assessment process. So once we move away from a service level system, which in a roundabout way is our assessment process of children in foster care currently, we had to come up with something different. They directed us to use the Child and Adolescent Needs and Strengths tool to look at that, and other assessment tools. We did our due diligence there and learned that we'll have a new CANS, and I'll talk a little bit about that, but we could really get to an assessment tool, a new version of the CANS that could link to the service packages. So as children are assessed, utilizing the CANS, which is used in the system today, we could look and identify as a system what's the optimal service package that child should be placed in to receive those services. Lastly, the 88th session, and this was a biggie, they took those recommendations on the new clearly defined models and the assessment tool and directed DFPS and HHSC to implement the Texas Child Centered Care T3C system. They made historic investments to do this. I won't go line by line because I think you'll get this presentation, but I believe it was $150 million additional dollars that were invested into the foster care system and to kinship care services out of this last legislative session. The foster care funding acts as a bridge. There's funding that was given to act as a bridge till we get to the Texas Child Centered Care and enhance rates throughout the service level system, and then eventually, get to a place where we have T3C. They also directed about $70 million to the implementation and rates for T3C in this biennium. Additionally, they included funding to enhance kinship care services. Erica talked a little bit about that, but some of it is to offset and get homes ready, you talked about daycare and some of the other things, getting funding that is a little bit more flexible to meet the exact needs of what kinship caregivers need. And then once T3C rolls out, they also increased the daily rate for relative and other designated caregiver program. Those are homes that are unverified. Currently that rate is $12.57 a day, but as the T3C rates go up, they also increase the rate to kinship caregivers. So how did we get there? We analyze data on children without placement. We have a lot of that. Children without placement, while it feels kind of new to some, it has been around for a very long time. It has, sometimes it's really high, sometimes it's really low, sometimes it's really high. So we have data for years back on children that have been without placement. We looked at the characteristics of those children. We looked at where they came in to those settings from. We looked at when they left the setting, what type of setting did they go to, what services were we purchasing. We looked at placement data. We looked at children that are served under child-specific contracts. We looked at a lot of data in 2021 and determined if we had these services as part of our foster care continuum, then we should be able to place children within the continuum under Texas Child-Centered Care. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about all of the stakeholders that participated also in the development and identification of the service packages, many that are sitting in this room that are advocates, trade associations, providers. We really were able to collect a lot of information on, this is the system that we have today. This is what would be needed to meet the needs of children today, but if we wanted to go this other way and have more clearly defined services, what would we need in this system to make that work? We had a very comprehensive survey with providers. They gave us a lot of very good information. And so we took that information, defined out 27 service packages, and then HHSC as our rate setters went off and developed rate methodology and rates to support each of those service packages. This just talks about, I won't spend a lot of time here, but in the future, moving away from the service level system, we really are moving to purchasing clearly defined services for children, using the assessment tool that I mentioned to do that, and then also having fully funded rates. Again, I'll say it, fully funded foster care rates to support each of these service packages, because that is what the 88th legislature did, is they fully funded each of the rates that we put forward. The key components, I've talked about the universal screening and placement process. As we move to rolling out community-based care statewide, the universal screening, the assessment process, the CANS 3.0 will be something that's applied to all children in the system. So even if you're in an area where community-based care has rolled, or if you're in an area where it hasn't yet rolled, the CANS 3.0, which is what we're calling the new version of the CANS, will be administered to all children at ages 3 and older. And then we will have a placement process. One thing that changes under the T3C structure, and I can give you, I won't go into it today, but I can give you the information on it if you're curious, is that the administration of that CANS 3.0 assessment moves from the current structure where CANS is administered by a Star Health credentialed provider under the medical model to having dedicated CANS assessors that are part of the child welfare system. This was important because they will be embedded in with placement staff in the regions. We think it'll offer more consistency to children where they don't have to be reassessed and reassessed and reassessed using the CANS, but where you'll have a dedicated staff person when they come up for reassessment under the CANS. That person already is familiar with the child, familiar with the child's record. The other piece too is they'll have access into our impact, our case management system, access to the biological parents and their information to talk through and get a more comprehensive assessment. The other piece, as I mentioned, is we have new foster care rates that we will pay. As it stands right now, the initial plan is that we will pay the fee for service, so we're starting there. If you're familiar with community-based care, you know that we've been paying a blended rate to the single source continuum contractors, the SSCCs. We are stepping away from that as we implement this, and we will pay a fee-for-service structure until we can collect enough utilization data to move into the blended rate structure. This is a very hard picture to see probably, but you will get it. With Texas Child-Centered Care, there are going to be 4 different placement types that a child can be served under. So I'm talking placement types, not service packages, which are the listings there, but I'll go through the placement types first. We have specialty packages under foster family homes, and I'll go through what those specialty packages are here in a second. So children will be assessed, and if they can be served adequately in a foster family home, that will be our preference through one of 9 specialty packages. If they require more treatment, more intensive treatment, but time-limited treatment with aftercare services, then they will move into a GRO Tier 1 setting. Residential treatment centers, as we know them today, and emergency shelters, as we know them today, will change. They will specialize in providing certain care under the T3C model. So there's 9 different types of services that an RTC will specialize in moving forward. And then the general residential tier 2 operations, those are, they meet the qualifications of the qualified residential treatment programs, the QRTPs that Erica was talking about before. They are also time limited. They are evidence-based models, and they have to, they are intended for children that are having challenges with impulse control, having challenges stabilizing. These are the children that we find without placement. These are the children that we find in psychiatric hospitals. That was another set of data that we looked at. And so the intent here is to get really intensive treatment services wrapped around them in the GRO tier setting, get them to a place where they're stabilized and can either move into a foster family home that specializes in their unique need, or into a treatment setting in the GRO tier 1. The fourth thing that is not listed there but that remains a part of the system is the supervised independent living program. So we did not redo any kind of rate structure or defining service packages for SIL, but it remains a placement option under T3C. You'll see for each of, there's like 9 different categories for the foster family homes, and then there's something called add-on services. So foster family homes and child placing agencies will be required under T3C to become credentialed to specialize in providing a unique type of service. The unique type of service can be basic foster family care, a short-term assessment home. These homes are intended for children that we don't have a lot of information on, but we need more information in order to make a good match, so that we're not placing and then discovering things after we place somewhere. These are short-term stabilization homes. They are time limited also. Homes that specialize in providing care for children with complex medical needs. Homes that specialize in providing the treatment foster care program that Erica talked about a second ago. Homes that specialize in providing care for children with IDD or that have autism spectrum disorder. So developing foster parents and child placing agencies that specialize in that in serving children with those needs in that population. Foster homes that specialize in serving children with sexual aggression or that have been adjudicated sex offenders. This is one of the places when we did our analysis that we realized we have good treatment programs in facilities in the state that serve this population. But once that child is ready to leave treatment, we have limited options on where they can go. So a lot of times they end up staying in the facility longer than we would like. So this offers a new opportunity with those specialty homes. And then services for children with mental and behavioral health needs, services for children with substance use disorders or they're having challenges with substance use. And then lastly, in a foster family home setting, homes that specialize in serving victims and survivors of human trafficking. The GRO Tier 2, a lot of those services mirror the same. Let me skip back up to the add-on services that you see in the green boxes. So unique to Texas Child-Centered Care and where we're heading is you also have you will be required as a CPA, a child placing agency, or a foster family home to have a program in place if you're serving children with some unique needs. The service packages that I went through a second ago are the primary packages, and then if the child is over the age of 14, there is an additional add-on. There's service requirements, but then there is an additional add-on to the daily rate for serving children with those needs. Those homes will really focus in on the normalcy aspect of being 14 to 17 in foster care, but also in helping the youth get to a good place of transition if they transition to adulthood out of the system. Services for pregnant and parenting youth. So we have a small but important population of youth in care that are parenting their own children or they're pregnant, and so we'll have foster homes that specialize in that, and there's an add-on for that. And then kinship care. One of the things that we learned in our due diligence for this project is that kinship care for child placing agencies, the resources that must go into developing a kinship home are different than a traditional foster parent home. Oftentimes, the kinship caregiver has been just called and asked to take in one of their kin, and they haven't made the life planning, haven't had the time to make the life plans that maybe a traditional foster parent have. So child placing agencies have to accommodate schedules, they have to offset the costs for certain inspections, some of those pieces, and so there's a kinship add-on for the child placing agencies that are working with our kinship caregivers that are verified. And then the tier 2 packages, there are 6 different specializations in the tier 2. The tier 1 really mirror, but again, our focus a lot on treatment. And then in the tier 2, those are the stabilization programs. And so those are for children that have a diagnosis of aggression or defiance disorders, complex medical needs, complex mental health needs, sexual aggression and sex offender, victims or survivors of human trafficking, and then substance use disorders. And again, for the tier 2 package, those would be children that are having a very hard time stabilizing based on their needs. So this is where we're headed. If you think, just think, no more service level system eventually. It will be replaced by a new version of the CANS assessment, and then a new service array, foster care continuum, that will direct to the different service package needs.
And so how is this gonna be communicated to the judiciary generally?
So I have talked a little bit to Jamie about that, because that is a very good question with our transition plan. We are 11 months away from having to have the state infrastructure in place to be able to start moving children and serving children under the T3C system. It's going to be, we have estimated a 2.5-year rollout past January the 5th, January of 2025. These are new requirements. It's a whole new way of doing business for our provider community and for foster parents. So that's going to take some time to develop out. We are trying to gauge the best, this is an introduction to this group, but then we're trying to gauge the best timing for starting to get the information out to members of the judiciary and to judges, because we don't want to go too early and then people lose that information because all they have going on in the day. But we know we need to hit at a time that they're aware of it, they understand it before we start rolling out in January.
Probably needs some advance, knowledge.
Yes.
But, I mean, from what I'm understanding, it's like the difference between a child going, from this level to this level to this level to this level and back and blah, blah, blah. A child is in a place that's the best place that child can be, whatever it is, and then these services are gonna come to the child.
That's right, they coordinate the service. The other thing is, and this was a directive from the legislature, is that whatever was designed shouldn't require moves as children get better. They should have the opportunity to complete the program and complete the treatment. So particularly in the foster family home settings, we will be looking at adjusting the service intervention, but not necessarily moving children once their CANS assessment comes back in a different way. There's a couple of things that are inherent for all of these. A treatment model, an evidence either informed or an evidence-based treatment model is required for each provider to become credentialed. And so that offers the framework for, that's the framework your program offers under when considering the unique needs of the children. Aftercare services is another thing that is required of most of these service packages, either 6 months, 9 months of aftercare services, where we heard from providers, a lot of them are providing some ad hoc aftercare support anyway. It's just not part of something that's formalized or an expectation, and it's certainly not something that's part of the rate. So under T3C, that is the other piece and part that changes that we're excited about. So I think there's a lot more to come. I included the rates in the PowerPoint. We won't go through that, but you can see what the rate is that is attached to each of the different service packages. I guess as comparison, the rates were increased for certain service packages. It's really unfortunate that we named things like basic the same thing as we had in the service level system, because that can be confusing, because even in the basic settings, they have to have an evidence-informed treatment model for their program and some enhanced training and skill for the foster caregiver. But in comparison, I think the basic rate today is about $48 and it's $83 under the Texas child-centered care model. So we anticipate some of that will incentivize providers and foster parents and others to become, T3C credentialed. providers, but we're working on it. So this is just an intro. There's a lot more that, a lot more to do in the next 11 months to get the system ready, but we're really excited.
Thank you very much. I know there's questions.
Sure.
Yes.
Can you explain how the treatment family foster homes currently, as they are, how do they fit into this new model?
So under the foster family home, there is something called T3C foster family care. It really, probably of all of the service packages we have up there, remains closest to the model that we have today. There are a few additional, or a few modifications and tweaks based off of our meetings with those that are delivering the service today. And the rate is a little bit different.
Thank you.
Okay, so as a member of the judiciary, I mean, we see basically the levels now, basic, moderate, specialized, and intense, but we really see an increase in the needs and services that are provided between, a moderate child going up to a specialized child. So, I kind of think of moderate as potentially being at home or being in a foster home versus specialized and intense maybe in we'll say more specialized placement. How does that envision in the new process? I mean, because to me, these kids are kind of moving either from a foster home or to an RTC, for example.
Right, that's a very good question, and that is one of the things that, through implementation and as we're working on it, everybody wants the crosswalk. Like, show us how service level crosswalks to this. It doesn't. So it's hard to navigate. We are working with the University of Kentucky right now and Dr. John Lyons, who was the inventor of the CANS assessment, because we're working on an algorithm behind the CANS that will help to match children to the appropriate service package and the appropriate placement type. It won't be the be-all, end-all of where children end up. We're still gonna rely on knowledge and professional judgment and best interest of the child. We're not looking to split sibling groups because we know they'll split sometimes in packages, and so those same decisions will still have to be made by judges and the department related to where children end up. But I will say the foster family home packages, treatment foster care being the exception, are really intended to be treatment and recovery services. So yes, there's treatment services that come in and then support the recovery and the healing for the child. If they're requiring something more intensive than that, they could go into treatment family foster care, but they may need to go into a GRO Tier 1 setting. These Tier 1 settings now will have an evidence-informed model behind them and an anticipated length of stay associated with them, and then once the child reaches a place where they're able to transition successfully into a foster family home, they'll transition. So we are taking into account that we have to have something that gets children to the right intensity of service beyond just having their need identified through the service package. I don't know if that answers your question or if it's still.
No, I think this is just something that we're going to have to learn,
Yes.
the movement, but it's just, for me, it's kind of like two clumps, right? You have basic, moderate, under the current system, specialized, intense. So for me, this seems much more fluid, but if we want to try to keep children's placements stable, just, for me, it's a little harder to envision how we're going to keep stability yet provide the same services that the children's needs require.
I mean, I think that's something we're gonna have to work together on ensuring under this new model. I think the difference is that from our study of the current service level structure, the way they end up in those service levels sometimes is relational to how their behaviors are manifesting, and less about the root cause of those behaviors and looking at the root cause, and so then they end up, in whatever setting they're in or in whatever placement they're in, and then they're provided the services that they're provided, and when they start, we heard this from youth with lived experience as a part of this project, then when they start to make progress, it feels like they have to move. And so we're trying to design a system that is flexible enough that it's child-centered, that's why it's named what it is, but that is child-centered and allows for a little more nuanced approach to meeting the child's needs and not making it quite as, black or white on when they have to placements. And, you know, I will tell you, somebody sent me a picture that looks like a straight line on the plan and a straight line on the design, and then it looks like this on the actual implementation, and that is gonna be, I would be naive to think that that's not gonna come and we're not gonna learn. The other thing too, though, is the legislature funded and directed implementation of an external continuous quality assurance and improvement process. So not internal to the department, but where stakeholders, many of you in here, I'm sure, will be part of this process where data is taken from the foster care system, looked at, evaluated, and then we will continue to make improvements and enhancements on the T3C model, but where we don't have 40 years of living under a current structure and then living under the T3C structure until we decide how and where we're gonna make the change. So I'm hoping that, intentionally, that is supposed to help this as well, to keep moving what's working well, what's not working well, and where are the gaps.
It's a big job.
It is a big job. But it's fun.
Sure.
It's fun.
If you have a child, for example, who sets fires, or you have a child who has sexual, behaviors, I was gonna say deviant, I didn't want to do that. But, so, those are, a lot of it is a level of where are they? Because, you want to get into where you can actually get to the root cause, which, of course, the root cause may be abuse, but also, beyond that and how you deal with whatever that is. But depending on where the child is, that may be just wishful thinking, and I guess that, like I say, it's a lot.
It is a lot, and it's gonna be a lot to understand. It's gonna be a lot as we learn together, and how it plays out. But it is, after taking this on becoming a part of it 6 years ago, I understand why the structure's been in place for 36 years. Because it's to build something from the ground up is, it's massive. But the stakeholders in this state have come together, and I think we have a good design. I think based on everything that they have put together, we have a good design, and so it's where we start, it's not where we finish. So.
Well, thank you very much. Anything else? It sounds like you're working hard, and we really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I think that Jamie said, I don't know about you all, but that was very difficult for me to read. It's
Sorry.
so small. So we can have that available for everybody if you all want to see that. Okay, so now we're going to go on to our next presentation that's going to be offered by our longstanding partner, Kenneth Thompson. And as you all know, he's the Fatherhood Program Specialist at the department, and he brings so much knowledge about how to support fatherhood and how to make sure that half of the equation doesn't get forgotten about. And although, of course, as judges, we're always looking at that half of it, but,
I am honored to be here. And I'm honored for us to have a conversation about fathers. I'll tell you just a little bit. I grew up poor, right? I knew my father, but I didn't know my father. I spent time with him, and so I understand why I have the passion for this work. All right. And so, is there a deck for somewhere?
Yes.
Because if you don't give me some guidelines, I won't go on. And while she's preparing this thing, I want to thank the good Judge Burns, because she has actually assigned men for me to work with. And I'm still close friends with Mr. Aaron Turner. He told me to tell you hello. And I can still remember his daughter. But if you see her now, she is special. I mean, she is doing wonderful. And so I believe that fathers have value. And I will say this to us. It is just not child welfare that has to focus on engaging fathers. It is every stage, every system that fathers are engaged in. And as I walk through this presentation, usually I'm talking to casework, and so I get a chance to really, really have a good time. And I said I won't have a good time with y'all. right? But they're on the front line, all right? But when I start thinking about this term, I start thinking about how do we shift the paradigm when it comes to fathers? And some of the data I'll show you said, hey, we need to do it. And we need to do it in a rapid manner also, all right? But the first thing, part of the element of shifting the paradigm is we don't do a very good job of understanding that father's capabilities in navigating life in certain circumstances before they come to CPS. And I would just submit that most of us don't wake up in the morning and say, well, today I want to have a CPS case. No, usually there's been a series of actions and events that has led me to CPS. And so when I think about these fathers that I work with, there's a couple of things, there's 5 components that I try to focus on, and particularly when I'm working with caseworkers. One is, what is his beliefs and value system? Not only what it is, but how did he function in it, right? And where did it come from, right? Does he have a purpose? Have he discovered his purpose in life, right? Or does he have, what about his thinking process? And where does that come, where does that originate from? His behavior. How do those things all tie into him being and understanding his value as a father? And the last thing is his emotional process. Because when you work with fathers in this arena, most of the time, what you have to get past is his emotional state. But also, and I don't have time to talk about it, but society has done some things to us men about emotions, right? And that is, we have what I call the 2 P's, pain and pride. Well, no one tells us how to address those things, so therefore, we internalize those things. And then that's why we die early and all those other things. There's so many other things that happen. But also, it affects how we impact and work with our children and how we work with our community. And so, let's go here. And by the way, I want to say hello to my wife. My wife is listening. So, yeah. So which button? Tell me which.
This one,
That, all right. All right. So the importance of fathers. Let me say this to us. None of us got here with that one. All right? But also the importance of father. Hey, it begins at conception. It begins at conception. And what we have to do with our fathers, right, and make sure, particularly when our kids are first born, we need to identify who they are early on. So therefore, when we identify who they are early on, then we also start to identify their families. That's the relationship. The sooner you do it, the better off you do it. We are, right? But also, think about this in terms of cognitive development. Study says that early as 6 months, and I said, I know I got a new dad here also that I get a chance to look at every once in a while. But study says that as early as 6 months, fathers make a difference. Because we nurture differently. We nurture a little different. We're more the hands-on. We'll toss them up. And right? We're not doctors. We're not doctors. But the way we nurture is different. But I think also, that's the way God wanted it. I mean, that's my, but then also, and think about the conversation we've been having about the emotional development of a child. You know, we said something about bullying here. What I would say to you also, when you start looking at bullying inside school, you can go back and look and see those kids who are bullying. Many times they are missing something, you know, that reinforces their value as a kid. And so they go looking for that some other place. And then on the flip side, flipping around, that child who is being bullied, that's insecure, many times that comes from not having someone validate, hey, that you're all right. You should be in this space. And don't let anyone take that space from you. And so and then we think about the social development. And I would just tell us, take a look. You know, one of the things about this work that we do, it's close to us. We see it. But take a look at the social, think about when you start thinking about the horrible things that take place in our society. You can start tracing those things back to many times. The lack of a relationship with a primary parent, and most of the time that is their father. And it's not all cases, it's not universal, but you think about this healthy social development comes from father. And then also, one thing, the importance of a father, it decreases the negative child development outcome. I'm watching it in my own family. That's the other thing about when you do this work. You see it in your own family. I mean, my brothers, sometimes they love me, but sometimes they do not. Because I am on them, my nephews, about spending quality time with their children. Because I see the difference it makes, all right? And as I said, I grew up poor. I was a father at 19. And when I do this work, I'm trying to think about what I would like for someone who was to say to me, all right, as a 19-year-old kid, right? But then also investing in kids, what we need to do collectively, good people, we have to have more services for fathers, all right? And they need to be both traditional and non-traditional. But it goes back to that statement about understanding his capacity. Many times we want fathers to take classes, but we don't even know if they can read or not. And so one of the things I ask caseworkers to try to do when they're working with fathers is to get him to write something down in his case plan. See, we can teach him more about being accountable using his words than using ours. See, because if he's in a manipulatory mindset, you can ask me anything, and I'm trying to please you, so I'll give you any answer you want. Right? But then we get frustrated with him when he don't jump over the moon when we don't ask him if he could do it. But ask him what his capacity is. And so therefore, getting him to write something in a plan sometimes give us an insight to who he is. Can he put a sentence together? And then one thing I also will tell you about men, and sometimes we know what we don't know. But we don't want you to know what we don't know. But that's why we put it, some of you have lived it. Some of you know what I'm talking about. But we have lived it. So think about the population that we work with. They are more like that than anything. Because part of it is out of fear also. Who wants to be known as someone who don't know something? And so therefore, I'll give you answers all the time to try to detract you, deter you. And way too frequently, systems have said, wow, he said he don't love his kid. Let me take off, you know what, we can move the case forward. But many times it's not that he don't love his kid. He don't know how to love his kid. Many times he don't know how to love his kid because he hasn't been loved. All right? And so therefore, that's why you think about all of these things that I'm going to show you. One thing is you're not going to hear anything about this wealth. Because it's not about wealth. It's about time. All right? And then when we think about breaking cycles, the first thing about breaking cycles, what you have to get me to understand is what is my value as it relates to my child. Because what do we do when we value something? We tend to take care of it. We tend to give it a little more care. All right? And it's not that he doesn't get up in the morning and comb his hair, go to work, but I don't do a whole lot of combing. Right? But it's not that he doesn't get up in the morning and go on his journey, but many times because he have lived in an unstructured or in a dysfunctional family. See, you can function even in dysfunction. Right? You can function even in dysfunction, and what happens is your dysfunction becomes normal to you. And so if that's what you have been trained by your parent, then perhaps sometimes that's your normal. Right? And so getting him to understand, comprehend his value. And we'll talk about that a little later, right? But then also leaving a legacy. The first thing I started using that word. Right? Because again, when I was 19, I wish somebody would ask me, Kenneth, what's going to be your legacy? Now, I wouldn't have had an answer because I didn't know. But you'd have planted a seed. You'd have planted a seed. So when I talk to him about that legacy, and that can give him something to think about. And then sometimes I talk, what legacy did your dad leave with you? Well, that can get interesting also, right? And so I think one of the most powerful things also that we have as an agency that I would love us to use a lot more is family group meetings. See, nothing holds me accountable more when I can get in front of my family. So I can't lie about my existence and what I'm doing with my child when I have other family members there that know the story. So I think that's one of the most powerful tools that we have as an agency. Now, I just want you to take a look at these statistics here. And this is about America. This kind of tells you why I think fathers are so important. Look at the column without. Right? And every time I see this chart, I start thinking about our kiddos. When I start thinking about our girls, right? When I start thinking about our girls, I always go to this. How many of you ever seen the movie called The Urban Capital? With John Travolta in it. I know I'm dating myself here, right? But it was so powerful. It was something that happened in that movie. It was so powerful when I think about little girls that's in our care. There's a song in that movie. And that song was called Looking for Love. Oh, come on. And think about our little girls. And we know that there's predators out there trying to act as though they are the place for them. So when that father does not validate them, when that father doesn't tell them that how special they are, that they can be queens, that their bodies are temples, well, somebody else will out there try to tell them something different. And so keep looking at that chart. And then when you talk about little boys, what I think about is what I call the hole in the soul. And I will tell you that the hole is alive. And to determine what feeds it. Again, go back and look at some of the things that we see in society, and we can see what has filled that hole. But if that father been in their life and he's healthy, not that he's rich, but if he's healthy, right, you don't see most of those things. Look at the other side of that chart. You can see his power. And so we just said collectively, we owe it to our children. Collectively, we owe it to our society to get better and engage the children, engage the fathers in child welfare. And let's see it next. And this one right here. And this talks about some of the things in Texas, right? The one that I pay attention to more often, I see the 35% to 42%, but then the one about the 500,000 children who has a parent who's incarcerated. What percentage of those? Now I don't know what percentage of those fall into our purview, right? But I do know this: the skills that's required to survive in prison are not the skills you need to be good parents. And if their rights have not been terminated, they are coming back to their communities. Now, are they coming back to the communities where there's resources for them? Or are they coming back to their community and going back into the same spaces that they've been before? All right? And then the one I think we just talked about, that 1.4 million that has some mental health and emotional challenges. All right? It go back to that chart, and you'll see that when fathers involved in those kind of kids' life, it's not near as many impacted by the system. And so I would just say that yeah, fathers matter. And then one of the secrets that I tell caseworkers when I look at these numbers, if you can't find me, find my mama. Mama knows where their boys are. But not only when you find mama, right, in these families, but also now how many grandmothers do you know that you would take that away from? But you never give some grandmothers an opportunity to be a grandmother if you never find it. And I don't know about y'all, but my mama is still alive, and when she speaks, we still listen. Right? But that's the power of this. And then if you look at that chart, that's who most of us are growing up with. And then it becomes a natural support system. So if you can't find me, find my mother. And so, and then we go here, the legislature. Oh, let me go back one. I'm going to get us back on time. See that? Hold on, all right.
There you
All right. All right, all right. But look, one thing about, I honor our legislature, right? I mean, because it's not about politics when I see some of what they are advocating for. when they are telling us how we can perhaps be better. And there's one that I really, see, I love House Bill 730. Because even though whether I'm the victim or the perpetrator, you need to let me know, right? And because most times in this work, the first time you hear about a father is from the mother who somebody's called in on. They don't call in on me. But most of the time that you hear about me initially, it's from a mother that someone has called in on. And way too often, what we have did with this mother, her voice, has ringed premium. And I don't know, and that's a conversation I have, I don't understand it. All right? But I understand our biases. And when I ask caseworkers to do, hey, just acknowledge you have, but turn them off. Because what good do they do the family if you come in with their biases, right? And so that bill, and then the other bill here that it just talks about, we just had this conversation. Kids feel better when they got family. Why do you think when we're trying to remove a kid from even the worst of circumstances, they fuss and they fight? They just don't come willing. And that's because good people, and we all know this, blood is thicker than water. And what do most of our kids do when they age out of the system? They go back looking for their family. Go back looking for that connection. Right? And I am thankful that as laws have evolved, I think recently, the law about even if your rights have been terminated, you can get better at living. You can get better at being a parent. And therefore, there's another opportunity for you also to re-engage in your kid's life. I still think the kids do better with their families and with their fathers. Now, the press is all that. Okay. And then also, this is why it matters. We have this thing called disproportionality, and these outcomes. And I would say many times in this arena, fathers of color don't tell their story. Their story is often told by someone else. But I will tell you that fathers of color love their kids just as much as anyone else loves their kids. All right? But also go back again to the first statement I made. What has been his ability, right, to navigate life up until the point that he become part of CPS? So when we get a chance to tell our own story, hey, you're looking at someone. See, there's some living proof. We use the term lived experience. There's some lived experience here, all right? But we don't get a chance to tell our story. But I would say go back again to those numbers. See, when I look at this thing also, what I also struggle with, I say, well, if we are under-resourced and we are spending time on families that don't need us, what about the families that do? What about the families that do? And so I think that as we get better, we keep getting better as an organization, right? In terms of trying to make sure, right, that all fathers have access to the same services and the same, because many of them have some of the same needs. And so that will also, over time, hopefully get better over time. It has to. Go back to that chart again. That chart that talked about black, white, blue. It just talked about the outcomes of children when their fathers are in or out of their lives. Now, here also, one of the things that you have to do when you're engaged in fathers, you have to change the narrative, right? Talk to me about my relationships with my past experience. Now, I will tell you, if my stepfather was alive today, I was going to apologize to him. Because I gave him absolute hell. Right? I really did. I would go back and apologize to him also. But I'm thankful that my grandfather, as I said earlier, that I knew my father, but I didn't know him. Didn't know what his favorite cologne was. Didn't know what music he liked. Right? And so his legacy that he left for me was void. But I will tell you, if you ask my son, those same persons, right, he will tell you, put on a little Earth, Wind, and Fire, you got it. All right? asked me about the clone. He said, you know what, we have tried to buy him everything from obsession to, but you know, when he goes to HEB and he buys this stuff called Old Spice. And the reason why I love Old Spice is because my grandfather was an Old Spice guy. But I could tell a story about that, but I don't have enough time. Right? But the legacy, see, what we have to get these dads to understand is that you don't leave a legacy whether you want to or not. And many times, they don't process that. Because see, when you're in the vortex of poverty, you're not always thinking about what you can do for your kid, right? And what you can do for yourself. And so one of the things that I try to do with fathers, and I can't tell you how many times I've been cussed out. I have been cussed out some doozies, right? But I don't take it as an offense. I take it as someone is frustrated and needs something. But I give them a couple of things to do. I send fathers to museums. And I want you to think about it. And the first time I asked a young brother to go to a museum, I tell you what, I had to put the fire, I could hear from there. But then I started thinking that the last time he'd been to a museum was on a yellow bus in the 5th or 6th grade. See, when we are in our normal life, we give our kids those experiences. And I told my wife I wasn't going to tell the story because I always cry when I tell the story. But I remember sending a young man to a museum. And he had cussed me out, and so, but I sent him to the museum. And then I asked him 3 weeks later to take his kid. He did that. But this also was the guy that we had gave his kid, his kid to him, and he had called me and said he wanted to give his kid back. And I can't tell you, I may have cussed going back to him. I'll take the fifth on that, right? But he called me back and he said, Mr. Thompson, now I understand. I said, what do you understand here? He said, I understand this thing about value. And I said, tell me why. He said, when I took my kid to the museum, my kid was looking at me as though I knew everything in the world. He said, I've never had that experience before. And then he said to me, the saddest thing about that experience, Mr. Thompson, is I wish I had a father that I could have looked up with myself. But then I had to articulate to him that, hey, but now you are the architect of change, right? And so he said to me, you don't have to worry about my kid coming back into the system, right? And so giving him something to do, right? And then also, when you do this work, there's a guy, I don't know if you know about this guy named Deion Sanders, who's up in Colorado coaching football, right? But I listened to his podcast. And when I mention this thing about the hole in the soul, I'll tell you that it's real. See, what we do when we have the soul of our soul, sometimes what we do is we put this callus over it. We grow up. It doesn't stop us from growing up. But Deion said this, and I almost cried because Deion said, hey, I had a stepfather. I had a father and a stepfather. I had a father and a stepfather. And one thing that we've never heard from neither one of those men is 3 words. What'd you say? I love you. I never heard those words from a man until my son became a man. And when the first time he said, I love you, I looked around like, wait, what? Is the insurance policy paid up already or something? But I've noticed this thing what we do now. And again, shifting that paradigm. Every time we have that conversation, we talk about love. Never end the phone call. And so when you start talking to these dads that perhaps that's in our system, ask them, how are you communicating with your kid? What are you leaving for them? Talk to them about their legacy. And as I walk through this, hey, we have to think about some of the barriers. Does he even understand the value of the relationship? And particularly his role in it. All right? What is his employment status? All right? I have the pleasure every once in a while of doing this job, of getting asked to speak. And so my last speaking engagement was on the night out. And so I went back to the neighborhood I grew up in. It's a place called Fairmont Heights. And so I'm sitting in the park waiting for families to come, and they started coming. And I saw this a couple of dads, and I went to talk with them. And I asked them, what do you need more than anything? And the first thing he said, I need food. And so therefore, some of the fundamentals, I need food for my kids, right? And then he said to me, I need hope. Boy, that hit me hard. Because see, when I said I grew up poor, but these folks are actually poorer today than they were they were actually poorer today than they were yesterday. When he said to me that he needed hope, and then I noticed that we had bought pizza and the line. And and what I would tell you also, good people, that poor people communicate to each, they have their own communication method also. It's not like they don't talk to each other. But before, they had so many folks out there in line for pizza because food was their top priority for their families. Right? And then also think about his history with domestic violence and incarceration. And one thing I would say about the agency that I work for that I absolutely love, we have started this conversation, and Erica, you signed the MOU with Wyndham ISD, and folks don't know who Wyndham ISD is. Wyndham ISD is the public school and the prison. So we have this deal with them, right, to where our caseworkers, if we have a parent, right, that we are communicating with that's incarcerated, they can take classes inside the prison, right? Because again, they're going to return back to their communities. And they still may populate and still may have more kids also. And so trying to get them some of the skills, soft skills, about what is required of you to be a healthy parent, and not just a healthy parent, but an engaging parent, right? One that also contributes to the community also. And so that's one of the things that we're most proud of also. And then also, again, what is his legacy? And one of the things that I try to do with families also, because if we think about it, we're going to work with families, and we're going to try to transition them and we don't want to be with them forever, right? And we can't be with them. And so one of the things, and some of these things I've done as a father because I've had to hold it myself. How many of you in here have a family motto? Every time. And so a family motto matters. We have one. And I can still remember at 6 years old when we were talking to my son, our family motto was simple. The family motto starts off and said, never surrender. Now you think, but now get down, never surrender, son, to the thought that you are better than someone else. Never surrender to the thought that someone is better than you. Never surrender to the thought that you can't do all that you dream of, right? But having someone here also that supports that matters also. And then the last part of that is, and then always keep the faith. Always keep the faith. If you do right, eventually right will do you. But just because you do right, don't mean that everybody's going to treat you right. It wasn't until he graduated from Texas Christian University, he played baseball there. And I got this gift, and it was a baseball bat. And it said to Dad, never surrender. So it's about legacies. And what I'm saying to you, it doesn't matter what race, it doesn't matter how much money you have, right? It matters about the time. And so one of my tasks is making sure that fathers spend time. We got to make sure we spend time. And so therefore I talk to them also about create scenario when you're working with me. Create scenario. One thing that I use with my father, and there was a judge that said to me, hey man, I like that. And I think it was a judge over in Brazos County maybe 7 years ago. I use an hourglass. If you're at the top of that hourglass, what are you passing on with the time that you have? Given that vision, right? But what are you passing on with that time? But also I talk to workers also, if we are the ones that's talking to families, what are we passing on to the families and the time that we have, right? And then also, one of the things that you got to make sure, talk to them about the 23 chromosomes. Talk to them about the 20. When I raise this hand here, these are my father's 23 chromosomes. My two middle fingers are the same size. I was trying to always figure out what the heck was wrong with it. But when I first met my grandmother, the first thing she did was look at my hands. And when she looked at this hand, she said, yeah, you're his boy. Those 23, so what I say is those 23 chromosomes go with you wherever you go, whether you want to go or not. And my last thing here is, come on, give them the resources. And what I would say to the Children's Commission, you're underrated. What we have been able to do in terms of creating pathways and creating documents. One of the documents that I give out, you see this, Sarah just said, but there's only one number that I give out because it is so critical to getting fathers the information about having legal representation as quickly as possible. And then, I carry this with me. And I used to only give those things away to fathers until I gave one to a caseworker. She said, hey, mamas need these too. Because also many mothers grow up without their father also. And so perhaps how they're responding to the work or to the conversation about fathers have everything to do with their relationship with their father or not relationship with their father. And so it's critical. It is absolutely critical to make sure he gets, if he doesn't get it, give it to somebody that's in his family as quick as possible. And too often what we do is we let them get away. We can't let them get away. And then here, and then I would just say this, good people. Sarah, you missed, I put 844-888-6565. I got it, I know it by heart. But I would say this, when we think about who we are and the work that we do, we have this capability of creating hope. And hope is something new for a lot of families. So this gift has been granted to me and you. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for very inspiring words. We appreciate it very much and all the work you do, Mr. Thompson. So now then we're going to hear from Raven Soul, who is the ombudsman for the manager of Health and Human Services Foster Care. And we're going to learn about what's going to be done to let youth communicate their concerns.
Yes,
Right.
ma'am.
Great. Thank you.
So thank you so much, you all, for having me here. My name is Raven Sowell. I am the Managing Foster Care Ombudsman with Health and Human Services. And
Raven, do you mind speaking up? You have a lovely voice.
yes, ma'am. You can't hear me?
I
I'm
can
sorry.
hear you here, but I want them to hear you too.
I want to project a little better, right? Is this better? Can you all hear me? Awesome. Okay, so my name is Raven Sowell. I am the Managing Foster Care Ombudsman with Health and Human Services. And I wanted to break the ice of my presentation by giving an explanation for the vibrant color of it, right? That green color that we have for our presentation template, actually it helps the children to associate us with a flyer that we have in facilities where they are. And so in all of the presentations that myself and my team for youth, they're all in green. And so this is kind of our branding. So I just wanted to give you guys a little explanation of our vibrant color. And if anything else, it will keep you awake throughout the presentations. So what is an ombudsman? An ombudsman is someone who protects and defends the citizens' rights, right? So my office, we investigate as well as report on complaints that are sent into us by foster youth. I don't know. Okay. All right. So. Push it just once. All right. Oh no, I went the wrong way. that the right way? Is that right? Okay, all righty. So, there are statutory, requirements, that have brought my office into being. And it started with Senate Bill 830 with the 84th legislature back in 2015. And then, in 2023, that, it was recodified within House Bill 3462 with the 88th legislature. And so with that recodification of my program, we received a few more authorizations and requirements, and I'm going to walk through some of those with you all. All right, really little, and I apologize for that. So the first and the most important, I think, is that we are impartial. We are an impartial party to the process of complaint resolutions for youth who contact our office. So what that means is that we are not biased towards the youth's complaint, nor the department or the agency program that we are looking into, that the child may be making a complaint with guarding. We only receive complaints from foster youth who are in conservatorship with Health and Human Services, with the DFPS. And that includes placements that are in-state and out-of-state, as well as hospital stays, which are not placements, but hospital stays, even if they are in what is called a group home through HCS waiver program. So it does not matter where they are as long as they are in conservatorship with DFPS. So we also have a requirement that we are to investigate complaints that have not been reported by the children. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. We also are required to inform the children as well as CPS of the results of the complaints once we have completed it. So there is also a requirement that we have to maintain confidentiality, and we have to get consent from those youth in order for us to disclose information to the department about the complaint. And so we have to explain to children who may be fearful or hesitant of giving us consent to reach out to the department to complete our investigations. If they decide, no, I don't want for you to tell them that I've called in, I don't want you to reach out to Child Protective Services about this, we have to explain to them the limitations that causes us in our review process, right? And so with that, that brings another caveat to us being able to tell CPS about the children calling us who want to remain confidential. And that caveat is that we have to de-identify that child's information before we send it to the region to let them know what we have found in our review. Okay? So the other requirement that we have is we are to have outreach collaboration with DFPS as well as Health and Human Services. We are also required to provide a corrective action of whatever findings that we find to either agency, Health and Human Services or the Department of Family Protective Services. And these parties, they have to respond to our corrective action. So if they respond and they tell us, we're not going to take your recommendation, then they then have to provide us with what they are going to do in lieu of that, and why have they decided not to take our recommendation instead. To go into that, we also have, if we if we find that there's any retaliation actions against the children for making a report to our office, we have to bring this information to the agencies, and together we have to talk about how are we going to address these retaliation processes with the programs that may have retaliated against the children. We also have the ability now with this new code, with the recodification, of being able to attend judicial proceedings that children call in and they may complain about, right? So we are able to attend those hearings if it's involving their complaint. We're also required to complete and publish an annual report. Okay. All right. So the goal of my office is to ensure that we are addressing all the complaints and inquiries from children who are in care, and to answer those questions that they may have when they're calling us. If it doesn't involve us, if it does not involve us doing a complaint review, but maybe just a question, we educate the children with regards to what we know for policy for whatever their questions are. So we also want to make sure that we are reporting abuse and neglect when they are calling us and we hear it. Maybe they don't realize that it's abuse and neglect, but we are mandated reporters, and so we let them know that we're going to have to call that in. We also work with DFPS and Health and Human Services to identify and address individual as well as systemic issues that we are finding within our reviews of their case complaints. Okay, so we also have expectations of the agencies that we work with. Our program works with, as I said, DFPS, as well as HHS, and now the SSCCs. And so we have expectations for them to ensure that there are positive outcomes that come out of the information that we're providing to them about the children. And so when we're reviewing these complaints, we want to make sure that they are following up with the children about the issues. We want to make sure that they are educating the youth with regards to the different information in their cases at a level that they're able to understand maturity-wise. And so we want for them to educate the children as well as the providers that are responsible for caring for the children about foster care ombudsman and what that looks like. So we also are in a space of where whenever children call us, we want the providers as well as the agencies to know that they have a mandate to report certain abuse and neglect to the appropriate places as well. And so our expectations are ensuring that they are keeping placements in a reasonable and they're keeping placements aware of what we consider to be reasonable and fair for the children who they're supposed to be caring for.
Ms. Solo, I'm so sorry.
No,
I
what?
really do have to leave right now.
No,
and
that's
so
fine.
I'm not at all interrupting you. I think that what you're saying is very, very important in your presentation. It's certainly something that we need to have so that these children, so we can know if these people are being further harmed in the placements that they're in, either from them or from the other people in Class C, that they're required to also take reports from whomever else. So thank you very much, and please, I apologize for having to leave right now.
No, thank you. I just don't want to push it again. Okay. So I want to just talk a little bit about the foster care ombudsman team. We when we were first established, we only had one ombudsman in 2015. And since in 2017, we gained 3 more ombudsmen, and currently we are about to fill our 5th position for ombudsman to help to serve the youth across the state of Texas. So it is 5 of us in our office who are taking complaints from our youth, not just across the state, but in different states when they are placed out of state as well. My team is consisting of people who have all worked for Child Protective Services, and they have had experience in various areas of the program for Department of Family Protective Services. And so they are very well versed within the policies and the procedures and the expectations of the department. You know, I myself was a supervisor and a caseworker, and I have staff who were child safety specialists who have experience as being CVS investigators, CVS caseworkers, excuse me, and actual CPI investigators. And so we come from a very diverse background from the department, and we have 26 years of experience combined with my office. All of the people who also work for us are vetted. They have background checks, and so whenever we're going out to see children, we don't have anyone who has not had background checks and have been vetted to the fullest of those expectations. So I want to talk a little bit about our work. Our work is we have various methods for children to make complaints to our office. We have the hotline, which is the main source of main method that they can come through. Then we also have an online submission process that they can do. They have fax as well as mail, which isn't used quite as often, but we do have those abilities for them to contact us, as well as a voicemail system after hours that they can leave a message for us and we can get back with them. So we follow up with the youth within 1 business day of the time that they've contacted our office to make a complaint, and we follow up with them at least every 5 days until their case is closed. We maintain full records of the inquiries as well as the complaints in our system that we have. That's called HEART. Little extra caveat for you to know about. But the complaint process is pretty detailed, and so when I say we only take complaints from foster youth, I'm saying that for purpose, because we get a lot of different people who call us. We get parents who call. We have places where we can send them. We do our due diligence to know the information of where they need to go, and we send them to those appropriate places. But we also have attorneys who sometimes call, and we have established a process so that children who are not able to speak for themselves, nonverbal, whether that be nonverbal because of age or nonverbal because of disability, their attorneys, if they have authorization through the courts to speak on the child's behalf, their attorney is able to call in a report or a complaint on the child's behalf. But they would have to provide us with information that actually shows that they have the ability to speak for that child. So we make sure that we are reviewing policies whenever a complaint is coming in, and that includes whatever program that they're making a complaint about, but whatever program that we find if there may be an issue with when we're we're checking the case documentation, right? So we have access to DFPS's impact system. We also have access to HHS's class system, which is for their investigation of child care facilities. We have access to those systems. And so when we are reviewing cases, say for instance, if a child calls our office and we need to call statewide intake to submit an abuse neglect complaint, and then that complaint turns into an investigation, we are required to follow that investigation to make sure that the investigator has addressed everything that they needed to address in that investigation and that they follow policy as well. And so, then this goes into us making sure that we are looking at those unreported concerns. So a child is not going to know if the investigator made or followed up when they were supposed to, and so that's beholden upon us to look in on. And we ask questions of those various programs to ensure that we get an understanding of what happened, and if what their actions did were violations of policies and procedures, then we make corrective actions for them and recommendations and send it to that appropriate place. Let's see here. Yeah, so again, this just talks more about the unreported complaints and the requirement of confidentiality with regards to the information that we are receiving from children, or we are learning within the scope of our investigation. When children call our office to make a complaint, they have a right to be ensured to have privacy in wherever area they are if they want to make a complaint. But they can also choose to have, if they choose to have someone with them, they can tell us, yeah, I'm okay with it. I'm perfectly fine for them to be in the room with us, but we want them to know that they have the ability to be in privacy if they're wanting to be private. So our annual report, we publish the annual report every December 1st. And what is included in that annual report is the activities that we do throughout the year, the trends, complaints that we are seeing in our complaints, the recommendations that we're giving to the departments and how they are addressing those recommendations, as well as giving an evaluation of the feasibility of the recommendations that we will be making towards the agencies. We also have how DFPS or HHS has committed to making changes with response to substantiated cases that we have been finding. We also speak about the outreach that foster care ombudsmen do throughout the year and what we're going to do the next year. We also publish public feedback from the previous year. This year, since our statute has been recodified, we have one report that's with the Office of Ombudsman. And so the foster care ombudsman's report is within a bigger report for the entire office. But you can still find it on our website, which I'll have at the end of this presentation. Next, okay. Here are a couple of common, we're going to talk about common complaints. Since 2021, common complaints have been consistent to be rights of children and care, as well as case recording and other. as you can see, the total contacts from, 2021 has gone up. And these have been the most consistent complaints that we have received from children. I'm going to get a little bit more into detail with regards to what that looks like specifically. So when we're talking about rights for children, we know that children have 47 rights, and this can be any of the 47 rights that they're calling and complaining about. It's a common reason why we are looking into a child's case. So this can include them not being able to visit with their family, not being able to visit with people who are not associated with the foster care system, and really issues with normalcy. The other reason that another common complaint that we have involves case reporting, which involves basically caseworkers not documenting their cases or not being documented in the way that is required by their agency. And so that's a big issue that we have also come across. The other section, it really involves complaints from departments that we don't get a lot of contact with, I guess you would say, and so we don't really have the correct labeling in our system for it. So if we get calls from children from HCS group homes or from substance abuse facilities, or even hospital treatment facilities, then they would fall into that, and it will be one that we have had to look into a policy book that we don't typically look into. So like healthcare facilities, we don't typically look into those, and so that's the reason why we have it under the other setting. So just to talk a little bit about the outreach that we have done and are doing. The first picture here that we have completed a YouTube video about 2 years ago that basically gave information to youth with the hopes of getting them to understand a little bit about our office and what we can do for them and how they can get in contact with us. The poster with regards to what I was telling about before and telling you about the association of the color is the poster that should be hanging in every placement so that children know how to get in contact with us. Also, we do outreach. Myself and my team are out in the field going to RTCs, going to placements to talk to children about who we are and about the different important information that they need to know about. So we're doing education in the field. We are also in the process of having a activity book that's finalized so that we can also make sure that they are aware of certain things through fun ways. And we are wrapping up, I'm in the process of creating a training series with DFPS for their caseworkers, as well as for the new caseworkers and the tenured caseworkers, as well as the CBC caseworkers. And so that is a bit of the outreach that we've been doing to make sure that we are known about within the field for the children. So that is the ending of mine. Yes.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
You talked about your outreach program. Do you keep track of the referral sources as to how the youth or attorneys or whoever is calling you learned about your program?
No. Are we keeping a tracking system of how they learned about our program?
Yeah, how did they know how to call you?
Right, no, we, with youth, we when I'm talking to youth, I'm telling them always, you should always see this, have you seen this? So, they usually don't tell me, how they've contacted us, but we don't have a tracking system for that at this time. good idea. Thank you.
Thanks, Dylan. Any other questions then for Ms. Sowell? I think you have Joel and Sherry with you. Would you
Yes.
like to introduce them?
Yes, Joel Schwartz is the Director of the Office of Ombudsman, and Sherry Valdez is the Deputy Director of our office.
Well, I think we're all going to call that Ombudsman Green now. We hope that you'll be able to stay with us for lunch, and I'm sure folks will have some questions for you. Thank you. It's very interesting. We've known about you for a long time, but I'm really glad to know a lot more about what you do. And I think the thing that stood out to me the most was that you have the ability to get into impact. That was kind of a surprise to me. So thank you very much for your presentation. It is about 12:18, so I think we will break for lunch here in a second until 12:48. We'll start promptly back. A second to the second. Are there others coming in?
Yes.
Okay, we'll wait a few seconds. All right, so we're going to switch gears from the agenda and shuffle things around a little bit. Go ahead and hear from Megan Lavoie from the Office of Court Administration. Welcome, Megan. Glad you got to come eat lunch with us. Tell us what you want us to hear.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. For those that I don't know, my name is Megan Lavoie. I'm the Administrative Director for the Office of Court Administration. I thought I would start with a general update on what OCA is working on, then I have some updates at the end about collaborations that we're working on specifically with the commission. First up are some of the big projects that we're working on. The first is the text reminder program. So this was a legislatively directed project that requires OCA to procure or develop a system that we provide free to counties to use for them to send text message reminders to defendants and other litigants. We're going to open it up to all case types. And so we're working on the RFP. We've been working on the RFP for several months, and that RFP should be hitting the streets this month. I just got the final statement of work in my inbox today. So we're really excited about that project. We know that some counties already have their own text reminder systems that they're using, but for counties that don't have a system, or even counties that want to jump on the system, it is going to be free of charge to them. So we're really excited about that. It's the number one in studies that have been done. It's the number one difference in ensuring that somebody shows up to court. I mean, I know I get a dozen text messages and emails asking me to show up to my dentist appointment. Stop, I will be there. So similar situation for court. So we're really excited about that. We're also working on a workload study for court staff. So a lot of y'all are probably familiar with the workload study that we do to determine where new courts need to be created across the state. So we just finalized this past fall the workload study for district courts and for county courts at law. The legislature asked if we continue on to determine where, how much court staff or how many staff courts needed, including clerks, staff attorneys, court coordinators, I think bailiffs are even going to be looked at. We also have to do an RFP for that, and that RFP will also be going out this month. We know of a couple of vendors that do this work. There's a couple of other states that have done this, including Kentucky and Colorado, and our hope is not only will the legislature be interested in what adequate court staffing needs are, but that jurisdictions can then go to their commissioner's court and say, look, this is how many court staff this study is saying that we need, and utilize that. So we're very excited about that. That study is due to the legislature in January of next year. So not a whole lot of time to complete it, but we're excited about that too. And then a lot of you probably heard about data. I feel like that's a lot of what I talk about lately. We have a lot of work around data going on at OCA. We are also working on another RFP for a new data warehouse. Our current data warehouse is about 20 years old. It's definitely a legacy system. Cannot have any more upgrades, so we did get funding to get a new system during the last legislative session. The legislature also passed a couple of case level data bills during this past session. One is House Bill 2384, which requires now annually for clerks to report by court an average clearance rate, average time before a court from filing to disposition, and the age of a court's active pending caseload. The Judicial Council preliminary approved rules for House Bill 2384 and 1182, which I'll talk about in just a second, this past fall. There was a comment period that ended in January, and the council is set to formally adopt the rules for House Bill 2384 and House Bill 1182 next week. House Bill 1182 is another case level data bill. It has 8 different elements that have to be reported by court, but it's only for jurisdictions above 1 million. We will be having webinars. We've been communicating regularly with the case management systems and clerks, but we'll be having webinars for judges and clerks over the next 2 months, just discussing these changes that are going into effect. The rules for 1182 do go into effect if the council approves them next week in March, which the first reporting period will be April 20th. And then for House Bill 2384 with those 3 data elements, that's an annual report that's due on November 1st. And district and county clerks will be reporting this information to OCA similarly to how they report other data to us now. I know there's lots of questions about central docketing. Travis County and Bear County do central docketing, so we've met both with those counties on multiple occasions, and so there will be a disclaimer in the data saying that while this is data by court, that the judges do rotate. So we'll see what we get in, and I'm sure that there will be changes going on in the fall and probably next legislative session as we see what we get and how we can improve that data. Another thing that the Judicial Council is working on, so the Judicial Council, if you're not familiar with it, is the policy-making body for the judiciary, and they make legislative recommendations. They also make recommendations to the Supreme Court, to OCA. They came out with their charges in November, and committees will start meeting this spring. They have 4 committees: criminal justice, civil justice, public trust and confidence, and a data committee. And some of the charges that I think this commission would be interested in, there is a charge on studying how to use artificial intelligence in our courts. I'm sure everyone has been to a conference or seen a presentation on artificial intelligence. I would love to see, what I haven't seen at all these conferences and presentations on AI is an effective use of AI being used in the judiciary or in the court system. So I would love for Texas to be on the forefront of that. What that is yet, I don't know. So if y'all have ideas or bring them our way or bring it to the council. Other charges that they're going to be looking at is ways to improve court efficiency, and then also judicial profession shortages. That they have over 20 charges, so a lot of work there and what they're going to be looking at. Another thing that y'all probably heard a lot about is the business courts and the 15th Court of Appeals. I have been telling everyone that the business courts and 15th Court of Appeals are my additional children right now, taking up a lot of work. The business courts are administratively attached to OCA, so we are in charge of implementing them. So what that means is trying to find homes for them. So we've been meeting with counties and law schools, the real estate agent trying to find space for the business courts. In addition, we are working to implement the 15th Court of Appeals. We got a letter from legislative leadership and the LDB this fall saying that OCA, here's money, OCA needs to do this, so, we are happy to do that, and I spent all day Friday looking at space for that court, so, lots of work going on there. Both of those courts have to be online by September 1st of this year. I wish last year I was like September 1st of next year, and now I'm really upset. This year is here. So lots of work there. If y'all have any questions about some of the things that are going on with that, we can talk offline. I'm happy to discuss that with y'all. Another thing that I think I've talked to the commission about before is the success of our remote court interpreter program. So we've had the highest 3 months ever in the last year in September, October, and November. So in September, our interpreters did 374 sessions. In October, 427. And then in November, 401. So if you haven't utilized those interpreters, we have interpreters that speak Spanish, Portuguese, German, and French. And they do non-evidentiary hearings. So if you can't find an interpreter, they're a great service. It's really easy to book them. You can just email them at interpreter@txcourts.gov. Similarly, something this commission has talked about, or complaints I've heard, is the lack of court reporters. I probably get 2 or 3 complaints each week about the need for additional court reporters and the problem that judges are having finding them, or that their court reporters are getting poached from the rural areas to the urban areas, and even some poaching between the urban areas. So something that we are exploring, we're in the preliminary stages, is doing something similar to our remote interpreter program and doing that for court reporters. The business courts obviously need court reporters and will likely use a pool of court reporters, and so that's something I'm hoping by the next commission meeting I'll have more to share there, but that's something that we're exploring, so we definitely know that there's a need out there. Some of the things that we're working on with the commission, y'all might have already had some updates on this, so I didn't want to spend a whole bunch of time, but the early intervention court liaisons, they are continuing to do their work, and we are going to be meeting with the commission, DFPS, and PPRI with A&M in, I think in a week or two, to discuss the evaluation of that grant program, so we're looking forward to that. The other thing that we've been trying to do is get more data from our CPCMS case management system. I know the data committee met with OCA last week on that, and we do have some staff that have a grant from the commission working on that. One of the things that we'd love to do is have a dashboard. I don't know if any of y'all have looked at our bail dashboard that has all of our bail data, but it's really intuitive. You can search by county, has tons of information, and it's very pretty and easy to use. And so we're hoping to do a similar dashboard for the data that's in our CPCMS case management system using Tableau. A lot of y'all probably are familiar with Power BI, but Tableau is one of the newer softwares that we're looking into. So that's my brief update. Happy to answer any questions or touch on anything that I didn't cover.
Thanks, Megan. Any questions for Megan from anyone?
Very quick, can we look at the bail dashboard that's
It's-
modeled on?
Yes, it's on our bail website. So if you go to our homepage, you can navigate to the bail website.
Good question, Megan. How many court reporters do you all have at OCA who are doing all these hearings?
We don't have any court reporters right now.
I'm
You're
so
talking about
sorry, I
interpreters?
meant to say interpreters.
We have 5. Yes.
I will give a shout out for those guys. Leo and his team do an excellent job. They help us out quite a bit, way out in our rural counties, and folks who are there present always are amazed at what a wonderful job they do. So please give them a big pat on the back. I thought Dylan might ask about something else. We learned yesterday that the department is in the process of creating a new SACWIS system, kind of from the ground up, and I think are encouraged to work with OCA so we can share data with them. That's something that I know Dylan's been very involved in as well. So it may come as a surprise to folks listening that impact will be going away after however many years it is, and at some point we'll have a new SACWIS system. Hopefully be able to exchange data with our court system, but also I know they're looking at data exchange with TEA, et cetera. And I thought Judge Ferguson would say something about AI.
Thank you, Judge. How much time have you got for me to tell you the great ways that we're using AI? There's a lot of use that's being incorporated into judicial administration in our office. What we're calling it is AI fills the gray. So if it's black and white, then you don't need AI, you can use Excel. If this, if that. It's in the gray where you need a little more discretion and evaluation, which is where AI can be useful. So we are working with an AI think tank out of Utah, and we tell them, wouldn't it be nice if we could do this? And then they help us do it, and we test it out and see if we like it. So one of the ways that we're using it now is when we're evaluating court-appointed counsel applications. We have an automated system, as you know, where they go online, they put in all their information, it drops into a spreadsheet. If the income falls below a certain point, or if they have one of the automatic triggers, previously found, getting federal benefits, etc., then it automatically notifies the lawyer, appoints, and notifies the person. If they're well above, which I think for us is 200 or 300% of the federal indigency standard, then it notifies them that they've been declined, they don't qualify, go get a lawyer. But if it's in between, then we have it evaluate a comparison of their expenses they've entered with the income they've entered and evaluate the family dynamics and scenarios. And then it recommends to me whether it should be granted or not, because it's purely in my discretion in that range. My coordinator has told me that that system saves her 8 hours of administrative work a week. So 1 out of her 5 days was spent doing that job, and now it's done basically automatically. It dropped our time from arrest to appointment of counsel from 6.7 days to 0.4. So less than half a day to get it.
Would you consider that to be generative AI or? Okay.
Generative AI is a word creator, right? It's a word predictor.
Right.
So it doesn't think, it doesn't learn, it predicts what the next word should be based on the prompt it got. We have used generative AI in our testing. And it's great if you're an expert on prompt generation. So you can actually create error in the response by the prompt. The prompt is the question you ask, right? By how you ask the question. And they're teaching now 3 or 4 day courses on how to create a prompt. That's it. And it looks like, what did somebody call it the other day? Like the NASA structure of leadership when they put it on the wall of all the bubbles and lines. It's incredibly complicated. My experience has been to get the product you want correctly generated. It takes between 3 and 9 attempts in corrections and modifications where you get the wrong information first, right? So yes, it can be used. It is extremely hazardous if you don't verify the law and the format and the information that it gives you, because it looks great. It's just wrong.
That's what I should clarify, is that I have not seen a lot of examples of generative AI being used for good. I would love to see that, and we have been encouraging staff just to play around with it so that they're familiar with. I think people are scared of it.
They should be.
Yes, but also don't want to ignore it because we're going to be way behind. We used it we didn't submit it, but we used it for a fiscal note. Because OCA does all the fiscal notes for, I think we did 1,700 last session. And it did a great job. We didn't submit it, but, so.
Well, I can give you 2 examples of what I'm talking about, and maybe I'll give you one more. So there is now, AI, by the time I started speaking a minute ago, I'm now out of date on AI. That's how quickly AI is evolving. It's every 30 minutes something new happens. There's a new system from about 10 days ago that claims to be a legal-only generative AI assistant. And it says, we know Texas law. I said, great. And for the family law judges, I logged into it and I said, what is the standard for the burden of proof to modify a geographic restriction in a temporary order modification? Okay. Its response was, best interest. And I said, are you sure? Oh yes, check this code section. That code section is wrong. Like, okay, this is not great, right? However, I asked it to draft an order for me denying a modification summarily without a hearing for failure of the affidavit. And the first attempt it gave me was just terrible. The second attempt, not good either. And so I pointed it to the statute, I told it which subsection I wanted it to use, and it created the best order I've ever seen submitted for that purpose. But I had to really, and if I didn't check the law, which is the pro se fear, by the way, our concern is that it's free, it's online, every pro se is going to use it, and they have no means to verify that it's right. So they're going to be filing frivolous and false and misleading things that are going to make lawyers seek sanctions against someone who's not trying to mislead. They just have automation bias, trusting that the computer must be correct. So the answer is yes, there's a lot you can do with it, but it is fraught with risk. And it doesn't take less time because you have to verify everything in it is right. So that's the reason you're not hearing a lot of uplifting in our speeches, is we're just not there yet. We're still terrified that people are going to mislead us and make our jobs harder, not easier.
I have a question on AI. Because I have heard that in the private sector of things, you can implement AI to take a look at all your databases, all your emails, all your business documents. And so it basically becomes familiar with your entire, what would have been a paper file of your entire business, right? Your clients, all of that. And you can ask it to prompt things to help create information about those data compilations, right? So I'm kind of thinking in the context of court orders, right? And it's particularly to this area of the law, because we have so many orders that we have on these children over expansive periods of time, depending how long that they are in care. And, sometimes orders don't completely erase another order, though, they just modify, but there's still something in this order that's still in effect within this order. And then we have these caseworkers who have to keep track of all of these orders and know what's in every single order. And so I was thinking the other day when I had heard about how AI can go into data compilations and kind of mine that to kind of put information together, I was thinking, what if we had a database of the orders where the AI could go in and create a summary after having reviewed all the data within the orders to see what was modified, what's still in effect, and kind of pump out a summary order. Because what I run into a lot with caseworkers, for instance, is they don't know the orders because they're only relying on the last order and they're not relying on the orders in the past. And so I'm saying, well, didn't you know that, why are we looking at this person again? I ordered that they're never gonna see this person right now because this person trafficked them. But we have a new caseworker on the case who's not familiar with the case, and they're saying, well, we're gonna look at this family member. Well, there's an order from last year. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so I'm just wondering, is there any AI capabilities like that? And what could be implemented to, I'm sorry.
No, gonna stop Roy before he starts, but we've gotta move forward.
Oh.
We're
Be my
gonna
guest.
talk about this offline.
What he didn't tell you is that that's actually not the real Judge Ferguson. Right now, because AI has enabled him.
I thought he looked really good. So that explains why. Okay. Well, thank you all. That we we got a lot
Right.
to do on that subject moving forward. Interesting. Okay, well, everybody's juiced up now. Tab 3, if you will look behind tab 3 or page 22 in the PDF, it includes details on each of the Children's Commission projects. And at this time, we're going to switch gears to the Children's Commission staff updates, and we'll focus on some of the highlights from our last fall meeting until now in January. So Jamie, take it away.
Well, hello everyone, it's great to see you today, and for those tuning in on YouTube, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. As you can see from our strategic plan in the report behind tab 3 that Judge Hoffman referenced, collaboration is our very first strategy, it's our very first goal, it's at the center of everything we do at the Children's Commission. We simply could not do what we do without all of you, so we're very grateful for your partnership. I did want to welcome two guests we haven't spoken to today, Judge Katrina Griffith from Houston, who handles exclusively PMC cases and is an absolute trailblazer and juggernaut and someone I admire greatly. Thank you for being here with us today. Also, Tiffany Roper, who's now a consultant with KC Family Programs. Didn't know I was going to do this. I think, hopefully, many of you have enough history to know that Tiffany was our first assistant director. And I just want to say welcome home. It's great to have you back. Thank you for being here. So our team has quite a bit to share with you today. We're going to condense our update a little bit. We hit the ground running during the first quarter of the fiscal year, and we want to share a few key milestones with you that we've hit over the past few months. And I just want to say to Kenneth, our family motto is enthusiasm counts, and there's a chant that goes with it. So enthusiasm counts. Here we go. 30 minutes. We're going to drink from the fire hose. So the first one is our annual report, and we have copies here for those who are in person. It is available on our website if you want to access it there. It's on our homepage right now. I would be remiss if I didn't mention our communications manager, who couldn't be here with us today. She had an unavoidable conflict, but her name is Jessica Argijo, and I can say quite simply, this is her brainchild and her creative energy, and she is alone in a forest of lawyers and very detail-oriented type A people. She's our lone creative, so if you see her, please thank her for her work. Also, we're going to go in order of our committee structure, and we'll talk about systems improvement. I'm having a little trouble with the slides. Okay. I'll just keep talking, and we'll see if we can get it to work. So, many of you know that the state is transitioning to community-based care, and single-source continuum contractors are taking over case management. And one of the most recent ones to do that is Empower in Region 3 East or Metroplex East. Stage 1 in this region began in September of 2023 with a full transition to Stage 2 envisioned actually in March of 2024. So it's moving very fast from Stage 1 to Stage 2. We received generous support from KC Family Programs and were approached by the North Texas Foster Care Consortium to bring together a legal convening to learn about community-based care and the impact on the attorneys, the judges, and the advocates as this transition occurs from Stage 1 to Stage 2. So due to the size of this community, we broke it into actually 2 convenings. The first took place in McKinney and was graciously hosted by Judge McCraw at the courthouse. It was a great event, and we invited Collin, Grayson, Fannin, Hunt, and Rockwall counties. The second convening is planned for next week in Dallas at Dallas CASA, and that'll include Dallas, Ellis, Navarro, and Kaufman counties. Approximately 60 attorneys and judges attended the convening in McKinney, and we had 4 panels. We had a data presentation, then we had a panel from attorneys that represent DFPS or the SSCC, and we talked about things like, what do you put on your orders, who do you represent, and conflicts of interest. I know that's often a question that comes up of, what obligations do you have to a third-party entity, that kind of thing. It was a great panel. It was followed by an ad litem panel, attorneys who represent parents and children, and there was a CASA director on that panel as well to kind of talk about from their perspective how they figure out the org chart, who do they need to call when they have an issue. And then we heard from some judges who had a very frank and open discussion about the lessons learned, the good, the bad, and the ugly, so to speak. And we really look forward to replicating this in Dallas and think it's been really impactful to engage the judiciary in this way. We've been in conversations with the Alliance about doing it in other regions as well as the state rapidly moves towards community-based care throughout. And so we're very grateful for that partnership and also to Casey for the financial support to make sure that we could bring those groups together. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Amy to talk about some other systems improvement efforts.
So I'm gonna talk to you about prevention. In 2021, the 87th legislature passed House Bill 3041, which created the Texas Family, the Preservation Services Pilot. And so DFPS launched Texas Family First in 4 regions. So you don't see it on the slide, but we have a great walkthrough of the court process of kind of what that pilot looks like. And so the commission, to kind of help support and explain this, worked with DFPS, Belong, Casey, in Region 8B. That's one of the pilot sites. And we did a training, a full-day training with over 50 attendees. We had judges, attorneys, child welfare professionals, CASA, and it was a time to come together to clear up misconceptions, provide clarity on the candidacy definitions, evidence-based services, family engagement, and we received some really good feedback that it was very well welcomed and really helped clear up a lot of that confusion. In the afternoon of that training, our very own Dylan Minch provided a reasonable efforts training, and then we made everyone do a role play in the afternoon. So they got to role play an adversary hearing and the final trial of these new reasonable efforts findings. So we hope to expand these trainings to the other regions in this upcoming year, but it was very beneficial to everyone. The next topic is education, and last September, we actually participated in a foster care and education summit in Tomball, and that was with DFPS and TEA. It was an all-day training for educators and foster care liaisons, both from K-12 and higher ed. Poor Judge Katrina Griffith didn't know I was going to do this, but she also provided a amazing moderation of a panel of young adults with lived experience. So these professionals got to hear from lived experience themselves what it was like going through the education system while in foster care, what they wish people knew, what impacted them. So it was a really great, that was one of our top-rated sessions. They also received presentations on the ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act. We kind of put together a toolkit and that addressed issues such as dispute resolutions, education best interest decision-making, and designated points of contact. When a youth in foster care changes schools, we want to make sure the biggest key thing is communication. Let's have the DFPS and the schools talk to each other. So this is a guide of what that timeline looks like, what expectations are on each side. And we are planning our next one for this September. We've been invited to Angelo State, so we're very excited. Our program specialist, Chelsea Martinez, is going to be guiding this new summit. And they have a kind of group called the Fostering RAM Success, where they will help use their lived experience voices and be a part of this. So we're very looking forward to kind of seeing this in September.
This is what we get for trying to make pretty slides for you. But also, I will say, there's going to be a lot of anticipation, and you're really going to love them when you get time to look. So I'll pause on these for just a second while Dylan and Renee eventually start talking, and you can go back and reference them later. So I'll kick it over to Dylan to talk about legal practice and process.
Sure, so I wanted to focus on one update from our Legal Representation Committee. We have sort of brought to the attention of the committee that a lot of judges are experiencing challenges recruiting attorneys to serve on their appointment list for attorneys representing parents and children. There's both an issue of attorneys not having enough attorneys on the list, and also of sort of an older cohort of attorneys who have been doing this work for a while, sort of aging out of the field, and concerns that there's not a new generation of attorneys who are now entering this work. And so to try to help with that issue, we have collaborated with the Texas Indigent Defense Commission to create a series of videos, sort of testimonials from practitioners in the field about what their experience is in child welfare and what brings them to the field. So we've actually collaborated and developed 5 videos that are now live on the Texas Indigent Defense Commission's YouTube channel. They are titled What Led You to Practice the Area of Child Welfare Law, How Do You Enter the Child Welfare Law Field, What Makes Child Welfare Unique, and What Inspires You About Child Welfare. And we had a video queued up if the PowerPoint is cooperating. The final one is the importance of high quality legal representation. So hopefully we'll be able to play that video because you see an example of the work that's been done.
The Supreme Court of the United States has made clear that the right of a parent to rear their child is one of the greatest rights protected by our Constitution, arguably second only to your own loss of liberty. But many parents would give their own life to protect that of their child, so I think they might be neck and neck. If we're going to have the government taking children away from parents, we need to be absolutely sure that those parents are represented by someone who understands the law and is up to the fight against the most powerful government in the world. And Texas, of course, is as large or larger than many countries in the world when it comes to our assets and our finances. So it is crucial that these parents have that important right defended and protected by someone who is competent, qualified, zealous, and knows the law.
Because the stakes are so high, we're talking about potentially forever severing the bond between a parent and a child and forever severing that relationship.
When I originally went into doing child welfare cases, it was kind of you almost looked at it kind of as the stepchild of the types of cases that people took. And I think everybody quickly started realizing over the past, 15 years that these cases are really important. We are looking at parental rights being terminated, and that's something that is of highest importance. And I think it deserves the attention, not only for the parents, but also for the children. These are the most vulnerable, the most innocent members of our community. And if they don't have the representation they need to be protected, also the parents don't have the representation they need to be defended and fought for, then everything falls apart. These cases are, I think everybody says they're kind of like the death penalty of the civil area. And I think that's absolutely true. The stakes are so high on these cases, and I think they really deserve the time and attention that they're getting now.
It's to keep the system fair, right? You need good parent lawyers to balance out the good fine lawyers at CPS. You also need great ad litems for the kids. Kids often get lost in our system. In our PMC cases, which is what my court primarily hears, we focus on the children's education, mental health, whether or not they're being brought along properly so that when they become adults, they're able to stand on their own 2 feet and be productive. And having ad litems there that advocate for those children's needs is really an important function. So their jobs are really paramount in my mind.
The representation directly impacts the child and the family. Depending on the quality of the representation, this child may never see their biological family again, or depending on the quality of the representation, this child may be returned to a unsafe situation. So the quality of the representation is very impactful for children, just shaping their lives and their future, and also for the family. This is very serious area of law, and we're dealing with actual people in real lives.
And so it's important that we have appellate attorneys and people who are willing to take on that responsibility, who can really advocate for the parents on appeal, and who have a good knowledge of what should and should not go on in trial and everything leading up to that.
The legal system is an adversarial system when you're in the courtroom, and it's so important for there to be the different viewpoints coming to the judge or the jury. If I just have the department having an attorney, I'm not getting to hear the other side of the story that the parents may have, or the children may have, or the interveners may have. And it's just so important for the fact finder to be getting the right information and to be understanding all the points of view so that we can make the best decision, not just for the child, but for that family.
As you can see, there are some of the stars of that video in this room with us here today, and they did an amazing job. I also really want to thank the Texas Indigent Defense Commission, because it was their in-house staff that did the editing, and the videos look amazing. And so what we want to do right now is to make sure these videos get as much exposure as they possibly can, so that both attorneys who are currently practicing, as well as law students who are graduating are aware of child welfare as a field that they can enter, both in terms of being able to have a career and have a rewarding career as well. And we've been working with TIDC to target some specific law schools to try to make sure we have a presence at their career days, piggybacking on the work that TIDC does on what they call their public defender days and making sure there's a presence on campuses so people are aware of their career path. So we've been focusing on contacting the Baylor School of Law, South Texas College of Law, Texas Tech University, and the University of Houston Law Center. And we do have a program that's currently being scheduled with Texas Tech on March 26th, I believe.
Yes.
Crystal, do you want to add anything else to kind of the work that y'all are doing as far as outreach goes?
Hi everybody, I'm Crystal Lefpignon. My newish title is I'm the director of the new division at TIDC called Family Protection Representation. We're super excited about that. With the passage of SB 2120 last session, TIDC now has new responsibilities to take on work in this space for representation of kids and parents and add on to what we've been doing for criminal defense and juvenile justice. So for these videos, we plan to put them out on our social media channels. We will be sending them out to law schools. We have relationships with all the career services offices in the state because of our work in public defense. We are currently building a master list of bar associations through the state, even for smaller counties, rural counties, that we're trying to get these out to. The goal with these videos is it's kind of a PR campaign, just let people know we're here if you're interested. We have a lot of other things happening in the works that we're really excited about, but as far as the videos, that's kind of our plan for now. If you have ideas for where to share them, feel free to share. It's on our YouTube channel, so they're easy to share. And then there's 4 others if you want to check them out.
Thank you, Crystal. And that's all I have from the Legal Process and Practice Committee, and I'll turn it over to Mildred updates on.
Can I ask a real quick
Oh,
question?
sure,
If that's okay. Dylan, I know that some of the law schools are doing clinics, and to me, that seems like the most natural way for that to happen is for them to have a clinic and then have a sponsoring attorney from that law school who will have that team of students go in and take some of these cases on the child welfare dockets. And so I'm wondering, have you guys studied what those clinics look like? Is there maybe a model that can be developed and shared with the other law schools to implement clinics that way?
That is another project we're working under LRCs to try to expand clinics. We have been working with, I believe it's Texas A&M in Fort Worth. It looks like that's probably not going forward at this point, but we are continuing to explore those options with other law schools. When we met with them, we used the existing clinics to try to help them understand what a clinic would look like, and we want to do that to expand to other law schools as well. So it's a parallel project, but it doesn't quite fall exactly under this.
Okay, thank you.
Without further ado, the training updates, please.
Thanks, Jamie. Hi, everyone. I've got 2 updates for you. Both were in-person trainings, and I'll start with the attorney training. On January the 12th, we partnered with Judge Randy Hofford of Williamson County Court at Law 1 to provide a free 1-day training entitled Legal Essentials and Beyond for Representing Parents and Children in Child Welfare Cases. That's our first photo on the left. That's Judge Hofford's staff and Children's Commission training team members who were on site to put on this great training. She had requested support from the commission to provide a training that would qualify attorneys to get on the court appointment list or to remain on the Child Protection Court appointment list in Williamson County. And she was especially interested in attracting family law attorneys to that list. So together, Judge Hofford and the commission designed a training that included a statutory overview of a child welfare case, statutory duties and responsibilities for attorneys representing parents and children, preventing attorney burnout, handling evidentiary matters, preserving the record for appeal, and a child welfare legislative and case law update. This gave everyone 6 hours of CLE and 2 hours of ethics. We had about 55 attorneys attend. They were mostly from Williamson County and Travis counties. And this was a really fun project to work on and very satisfying for us. It's been a goal of the training committee for a while now to create and share an updated 101 level content for new attorneys and attorneys who are new to child welfare cases. So now that we've built it, it's going to be, it can serve as a blueprint and it can be adapted in other jurisdictions. It was a real pleasure to work with Judge Hofford, and hopefully we'll receive requests to implement this training in other jurisdictions. Moving on, the second training I wanted to update you all about is a judicial training. Each January, the Texas Center for the Judiciary hosts the Family Justice Conference. And
And this year, TCJ included a court improvement program breakout track on January the 18th, and the commission facilitated 3 breakout sessions on child welfare to an audience of general jurisdiction judges. The second photo, the farther photo on the right, is of the first session that we hosted. The 3 sessions were a presentation on managing the courtroom while maintaining the best interests of youth when caregivers appear with untreated mental health needs. District Judge Aurora Martinez-Jones and her collaborating forensic psychologist, Dr. Richard Yuen, gave the breakout session that's photographed on the right. The second session was called The Impact of New Reasonable Efforts Legislation, What Judges Need to Know. And that was presented by Child Protection Court Melissa DeGerolami and Child Protection Court Judge John Eck. The third one was called Strategies for Managing Compassion Fatigue, Secondary Trauma, and Self-Care. And the presenter for that was Jenny Gomez. She's an LPCS with Coons Fuller Family Law in Dallas. All 3 sessions were well received, and as always, we're grateful to partner with Texas Center for the Judiciary. That's my update.
Now to Renee, talk about trial skills.
Thank you.
So first on our webcast, over the past 4 years, the commission staff has been able to build our capacity to provide live in-house webinars. And that's allowed us to start a library of free, high-quality MCLE content that's online. And one of our goals that we identified since last year with regard to our webcasts is to do so more often, to provide that content on a more regular basis. Additionally, one of the training goals that was highlighted by our commissioners was that they would like to see us really highlight some of our trial skills training content on our webcast so that it is more readily available to attorneys throughout the state. So far this fiscal year, we've hosted 2 webinars. The first was in October, and that was entitled Enhancing the Experience for Parents in Child Welfare Cases. And the second was the first in our new series of trial skills training content, and that one was entitled Laying Your Evidentiary Foundation. That center picture there is a screenshot of the webcast. That was live in November. Both of those have been archived and are available for replay on our Attorneys on Demand and Judges on Demand websites. We, so far for this year, have planned out a series of hopefully monthly trainings that are upcoming. The first was to be in January, entitled the transition of navigating the transition from trial to appellate counsel. Unfortunately, that did have to be canceled due to inclement weather issues that we had with our participants being able to participate online. However, it has been rescheduled, and that will be live next Friday, February 9th. The registration for that is still open and will remain open until the live training. Additionally, we also have our next trial skills training topic available, will be on March 7th, and that will be focusing on making and responding to objections. That registration is also live, and there was a resource letter that went out yesterday to everyone. So if you did not receive it, please let us know. We'll be happy to get that to you so that you can disseminate that. For the 2024 calendar year, we have planned out a scheduled monthly webinars all the way through November. However, we still would like to ask you all to please give us your ideas with regards to training. We always like to stay on top of what your needs are and what we can cover to provide the most relevant content. Some of our upcoming webinar topics that we will be providing also include representing older youth in court, filings for mandamus, and the intersect between federal and state child welfare laws. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to reiterate, these are all things that have happened since the fall, and you may be wondering, how did we pay for it? So we're going to finish with Patrick's financial report.
Yeah, behind tab 4 is our financial report for this current fiscal year. Just wrapped up the first quarter. There's not much really to look at in terms of expenses today, but I assure you that by the next time we meet, you'll definitely see some expenses there. There are a few things I'd like to point out. That's going to be up at in the very top section in our revenues. So the first is you'll see that we did get our first disbursement of our federal grant award, just over $1.8 million. That's pretty typical. It's about 1% higher than the last year's award, and so that's right on target for what we anticipated receiving. Second, as Jamie mentioned briefly about the CDC trainings and the TFF trainings and the support from Casey, you'll see there, the KC Family Programs gave us $25,000 for to support those two projects. And since this notebook has been created, we also just signed another agreement for an additional $15,000 from KC. So thank you all very much. We appreciate the support. The next thing I wanted to discuss is at the very bottom, that estimated carry forward to 2025. When we met in September, we talked about how just with the additional supplemental funding that we had been receiving since 2018, and then with the COVID funds, we were anticipating only carrying forward into next fiscal year, 2025, about 650. We didn't have our grantees, didn't spend down all of their grant awards from this last fiscal year, which left us with an additional $100,000. So I just wanted to mention that it's good. We're hoping to take into the next fiscal year just over 800,000 as opposed to only 6. So that's how we pay for it.
We'll take any questions that you have now about things that we've updated you on or anything in the report, any of the Children's Commission's project report.
All right, very good. Well, we do have a couple of collaborative council members who submitted requests, and they'll each have a couple of minutes to provide us verbal updates. I think Barbara Grimmer is first with the Texas Council of Family Violence. Step on up.
Hi, thanks. So I just have a couple of updates. The first one, I don't want to mess up any of these titles or dates. Some of you may be familiar with the Model Code on Family Violence and Child Welfare. It's a project with the Office of the Violence Against Women through the NCJ/FCJ. And so it's been sort of released and disseminated, but we did want to share that there are 5 information sessions coming up this year. In February, there will be an hour on defining domestic abuse. In March, best interests of the child. In May, use of experts. July, alternative dispute resolution. In September, modification and enforcement. Some of you know Krista Delgado. She was on our policy team for over 20 years. She was a working member on that code and is an expert on it. She's now left us to go work nationally in child welfare and custody. But she's still a great resource on this, so I wanted to just share that, and she wanted you all to know about it as well. And then my announcement is, I've shared with several of you in this room that we have our next regional convenings coming up in the Houston area and the Austin area, so DFPS Region 6 and DFPS Region 7. And these will be a little different than the ones I did in September, which was just for DV advocates, CASA, and DFPS staff. These in March are going to be a 2-day event, and we're also going to be bringing together housing advocates at DV programs and community housing advocates, and we'll be presenting some research on the links between child well-being and housing, and also how that supports survivors and their kids who are involved in the child welfare system. So the dates are, the Austin area is March 6th and 7th. It'll be at TCEA. And then the Houston area will be March 12th and 13th at the United Way. Anyone in this room, same as last time, is invited to come, and I'll likely be sending out targeted invites to those of you in those regions if you can help us get stakeholders there, especially child welfare stakeholders and housing stakeholders. DV always shows up, but we really want the other people that are working at this intersection to be there as well. Thanks. And the links, the registration did open finally yesterday, so I'll send those links out as well.
Thank you, Barbara. Any questions for Barbara? Just actually 2 days ago, I think I had a first impression case for myself with a new child welfare case where I placed a child who had not been with her mother in the shelter at the adversary hearings. So I'm glad that some of our shelters have that ability. So
Yeah,
it's time. Thank you. And we also have Tiffany Crouch Bartlett here from Texas Lawyers for Children. Tiffany, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. I'm here just to give a couple of announcements about some upcoming webinars. One of which Barbara, our director, Barbara Elias Percival, wanted us to let everybody know that the Child Protection Law section will be presenting a webinar with world-renowned trauma expert, Dr. Bruce Perry. The date has not yet been announced, but we're really excited about this. Barbara is going to have a Q&A session after the presentation with Dr. Perry. And she wanted me to add that, we heard a lot about the CWAP situation earlier this morning, and she feels, and we all feel at Texas Lawyers for Children, that if we all had a deeper understanding of the trauma that these children have experienced, that the CWAP situation would improve dramatically. And that if we focused on healing the trauma and building the trust and relationships with these children, we could have very, very different outcomes for our kids in care. And then another training that we have coming up is focusing on Dr. Rachel Keefe's very illuminating study, if you haven't read it. She's the founder and director of Foster Care Clinical Services at Texas Children's Hospital. And her article was published a little less than a year ago about the devastating effects of over-medication, psychotropic medications being given to foster children at a much, much higher rate than children who are receiving Medicaid, and also not focusing on the actual trauma at the center of these children's issues, and labeling them with mental health disorders in much greater numbers. So that is on February 21st from 3 to 4:30 p.m. and it's free, and we really would encourage and love for everybody to participate. And also remember, we have 15 hours of free online training as well. If you haven't done that, we'd love for you all to experience it and focus more on trying to heal our kids. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tiffany. Any questions for Tiffany?
What was the name, Dr. Rachel what?
Rachel Keefe. K-E-E-F-E.
Thank you.
Yes.
So the National Center for State Courts had their Rural Justice Collaborative meeting in Fredericksburg last week or the week before, and I forwarded your website training to everybody there. They were talking about trauma training, so thank you very much for that. All right, very good. We'll talk about new business here in just a second. If anyone has a new business item that they need to discuss, any of our commissioners be thinking about that for a second. I think Justice Lehrman talked this morning about the possibility of bringing new ideas or new topics to the attention of the commission staff to see if there was anything that you would want to have presentations on, or any new topics developing across the state that we need to be investigating or looking into. So if you think about those things as you go back home, please make sure that you email someone in the commission, and we'll think about that. Any new business then? All right, so we'll have our next meeting. It's a virtual meeting on May 17th, and then our next in-person meeting all the way on September 13th, as Megan said, is 2024. That's right around the corner. And then our final virtual meeting on November 15th. Unless there's any other business, we will be in adjournment.